Alrighty. We have some interesting stuff to get into today. Let me just set everything up here. Put that there. I'm gonna put this. No, actually, I'm gonna remove that. Do this one more time. Okay, and then I'm gonna pin that comment. Did it get pinned? Did it work? It did. Okay. We're live. We're here. Hopefully everybody's having a good day. Let's get into it. Canada's national embarrassment, Justin Trudeau, tells the Chamber of Commerce that we can punch back on Trump's 25% tariffs on Canadian exports by putting our own tariffs on things like bourbon, Harley Davidson's, playing cards, and Heinz ketchup and cherries. My God, the election can't come soon enough. Well, yesterday, another attempt was denied, to no shock at all. Everybody knew this was most likely not going to pass. I think the biggest shock was the fact that the Bloc actually came through with what they said. They actually walked the walk for once in their lives instead of just talking. What's up, Alan? How's it going? Anyway, let's take a listen at the absolute ridiculousness that Trudeau is spewing.
President-elect Trump got elected on a commitment to make life better and more affordable for Americans. And I think people south of the border are beginning to wake up to the reality that tariffs on everything from Canada would make life a lot more expensive for Americans. So that's part of the argument. The other part is we will, of course, as we did 8 years ago, respond to unfair tariffs in a number of ways. And we're still looking at the right ways to respond. But our responses to the unfair steel and aluminum tariffs were what ended up lifting those tariffs last time. It wasn't that Americans were paying more for their steel and aluminum, although that was annoying to some people in the States. It was the fact that we put tariffs on bourbon and Harley Davidsons and playing cards and Heinz ketchup and cherries and a number of other things that were very carefully targeted because they were politically impactful.
Politically impactful. Harley Davidson is a dying brand as far as I know. Nobody is lining up to buy Harley Davidsons really anymore. So putting tariffs on that, like, congratulations, Justin. You're doing a whole lot of nothing by doing that. Moving onwards. This is the big news of today. This is what the stream is based on. Everybody knows, most likely knows, Mr. Sunshine Baby. This is coming from him specifically. Well, this isn't coming from him specifically, but this is the tweet from him specifically. Hold on! A $60 billion deficit? Are the Liberals out of their minds? This is not normal. This is economic arson for Canada. Justin Trudeau and Chrystia Freeland want to bankrupt Canada. Let's take a listen at this absolute insanity. I watched this before I went live, and Freeland just dodges the question. She is pathetic, man.
Officials have leaked to the media that the deficit will be $60 billion or more. So is it going to be that, higher, or lower?
Mr. Perkins, because a Conservative filibuster has blocked the work of our Parliament.
Minister, the only filibuster is your unwillingness to produce the documents.
No,
but I would ask you a simple question. Is the deficit going to be higher or lower than the $60 billion your officials have leaked to the media?
I think that it is very important not to cast any doubt on Canada's financial credibility. So I want to take this opportunity to be very clear that Canada's fiscal position is
Will it be
strong
above or
and
below $60
sustainable
billion?
and continues,
Yes or no? It's a simple question.
continues to be
Why won't you answer
the
whether or not it'll be
strongest
above
in
or below
the
60
G7.
billion? Did you
Fiscal
officials have
position.
leaked to the media?
I just want to replay the very beginning here.
Fiscal
Officials have
position.
leaked
Officials have leaked
to the media.
to the media. So their own officials in the government, before telling Canadians, are telling the mainstream media outlets exactly what is happening. That is utter retardation. One more time.
Fiscal
Officials have
position.
leaked to the media.
Officials have leaked to the media. Why do they continue to do this? Why are they withholding information from Canadians instead of just giving it out to the public? Oh, we're going to hold on to it and then give it to the mainstream media so they can cook up some sort of narrative for our political gain. That's probably what it really is at the end of the day, isn't it? A lot of these organizations like the CBC, bought and paid for by the Liberal government.
Will be $60 billion or more.
And she can't even answer the question if it is going to be 60 billion or more. What an absolute joke. Absolutely pathetic. These are the people running the country. Chrystia Freeland cannot even answer a basic question that she most likely knows the answer to. Withholding information. Wild. Trump trolls Trudeau, calling him governor of the great state of Canada. It was a pleasure to have dinner the other night with Governor Justin Trudeau of the great state of Canada. I look forward to seeing the governor again soon, so that we may continue our in-depth talks on tariffs and trade. Guys, Trump's not playing any games here. Obviously, it's a joke. We're not going to become the 51st state. Everybody relax. Just a joke. He is making these jokes about us and making fun of us because Trudeau is such an incredibly weak leader. It's just a fact. Everybody internationally makes fun of him. Nobody has respect for him. He goes to shake hands with international leaders and they ignore him. I don't know how many times I need to bring up that G7 meeting, that summit that happened, and he was standing on the outside looking in while everybody surrounded Trump. Nobody takes him seriously worldwide. So of course, Donald Trump being the guy he is, he doesn't give a fuck. He's going to roast him. He's going to make fun of him. He's going to take all the shots he wants to. Rightfully so. Trudeau's an idiot. He's a loser. This is the little interview Trump did here. Trump, I spoke with Justin Trudeau. In fact, he flew into Mar-a-Lago within about 15 seconds after the call. Trudeau, once again, flying all over the place while putting a, air quotations, price on pollution, making Canadians pay for it. What a loser, once again.
I spoke with Justin Trudeau. In fact, he flew to Mar-a-Lago within about 15 seconds after the call ended. He was at Mar-a-Lago. We were having dinner talking about it. I said, you have to close up your borders because they're coming in the northern border too a lot. Not like the southern border, but they're coming in the Canadian border a lot. And drugs are pouring in. Almost as importantly, drugs are pouring in. Maybe more importantly, drugs are pouring in at levels never seen before. 10 times what we had. They're just pouring in. We can't have open borders. And I said to the president of Mexico and to Justin Trudeau, if it doesn't stop, I'm going to put tariffs on your country at about 25%. That's a very substantial tariff. So I spoke with
Justin, you better fix your borders, or I'm gonna slap you. That is exactly what is going to happen. As a matter of fact, Justin Trudeau was seen at another Taylor Swift concert. Yes, Trump is not playing any games anymore, guys. He wants the borders fixed, but the southern border, like 20 times worse than our border. 100%. 100%. Jagmeet, oh boy, just voted to keep Justin Trudeau in power. This is a little interview with reporters he did directly after question period. I don't think anybody truly cares what he has to say anymore, period. But sadly, we're going to take a little listen to what he has to say. As he continues to lie through his teeth over and over again, he just makes himself look bad. He exposes himself. He shows his true colors. Oh, Trudeau's a terrible leader. He's making all these issues for Canadians and yada, yada, yada. The list goes on. There's a laundry list of things Jagmeet has said about Trudeau, but he came out and backed him yesterday.
So nearly every other party in the chamber right now voted against giving the working class a permanent tax cut. It's ludicrous. That's why I'm running for Prime Minister, because it's clear the Conservatives are bootlickers for billionaires. If there's a tax cut that doesn't help billionaires, they're not in it. And the Liberals continue to let people down.
Conservatives made a point of saying that you weren't in the chamber during the recorded vote for their non-confidence motion that quotes you quite extensively. Was there a reason you weren't in the chamber for that particular vote?
Listen, the Conservatives, it should come as no surprise that we're not going to vote in favor of any of their games, because that's what they're doing. They're playing games. What they want to do is cut your pensions. They want to cut your health care. I want to strengthen pensions. I want to make it easier for you to find a doctor. I'm not going to support a Conservative motion that plays games like that. We're going to keep on fighting for Canadians. So nearly every other...
We're going to keep on fighting for Canadians. Just one more time, guys.
I want to strengthen pensions. I want to make it easier for you to...
Yeah, you want to strengthen your pension, Jagmeet.
Find a doctor. I'm not going to support a Conservative motion that plays games like that. We're going to keep on fighting for Canadians.
Ah, what a loser. Alrighty. Nah, something doesn't add up. If you guys have been following this, this is the dude who took out the United Healthcare CEO. A lot of crazy conspiracy theories, a lot of tinfoil hat stuff coming out here. Regardless of what you want to believe, I don't specifically care, but I do think some of it is interesting. Let me get this straight. The killer is Luigi, however you pronounce his last name. Majoni, however you say it. Ivy League grad with degrees in comp science, avid reader, and active contributor on GitHub. He has an IQ of 130 plus, but takes his mask off at a Starbucks to flirt with an employee. Then an hour later goes and calmly deletes the CEO. And then rides away on a bike. This is where it gets weird. A week later, goes to a local McDonald's where he brings the exact weapon, the fake ID he used to check into the hotel, and a written manifesto, the entire written manifesto on how horrible America's healthcare system is and how he somehow gets identified by the cashier. He sits down. None of this makes sense. Especially the part where he somehow gets identified by the cashier. Just by what? The pictures of his eyes and his face? Barely? I don't know. He works on his laptop until police come inside the McDonald's, sitting there with the ghost weapon and suppressor he made himself. Gotcha. So none of this is really making any sense now, is it? I don't know, guys. Kind of weird when you start putting things together. Speaking of not good, update, he now has 100 problems. Jay-Z has been accused. Now, this is coming out of the Diddy Combs, the Sean Diddy Combs trial, the lawsuit. The allegations are starting to get more and more wild here. I know a lot of people don't care about this, but I just figured I would cover it very briefly before we get into question period, House of Commons. Just wild stuff, more and more stuff coming out, guys. And it's not looking good for a lot of these celebrities. A lot of them actually ended up fleeing the country. Some of them did. So, I don't know, guys. I don't know. On top of everything, we have Trudeau's itinerary for today. He will be attending a cabinet meeting at 10 a.m. and he will be attending question period. Wow, he's actually showing up to his job for once. Shocker. Alrighty, let's take a listen at what's going on here.
19 minutes, make a joke out of the estimates process and say that because we didn't support the estimates, that we somehow were against, we were going to empty out all the jails. What a bunch of nonsense, Mr. Speaker. That's what passes for clever debate in the NDP. Of course, when he was in the opposition, I don't recall that member supporting the estimates for the Canada Border Services Agency. I don't recall him supporting the estimates for the Correctional Service of Canada. So I guess he wanted to free all the prisoners and open up the borders and eliminate air security.
I'm guessing that's a point of order. The Honourable Member for New Westminster Burnaby.
We never proposed cutting these programs like Conservatives.
Okay, that's just debate. The Honourable Member Chilliwack.
Speaker, I think after 20 minutes the member got his point across, but I guess he needed more time, just like he wants to give this Liberal government more time. Every time he gets the opportunity to cause an election, he signals his confidence in this Liberal government. And I know that he doesn't want to talk about the NDP record in our home province of British Columbia when it comes to the opioid crisis, because the NDP, the BC NDP, has been on the leading edge of making things worse. We have the most drug overdoses in the country, not the least, as he tried to say in his remarks. We saw the NDP giving out drug paraphernalia in candy dispensing machines outside of hospitals. We saw soccer fields that couldn't be used in Abbotsford because of the drug paraphernalia. We saw parks completely shut down in British Columbia because of the drug paraphernalia and the open drug use in our communities. And this member wants to celebrate the record of the BC NDP, which saw its majority reduced to a single seat after the last election. That is the record of the NDP, but they don't seem to care. On the border, when Roxham Road was an open unofficial crossing, the NDP thought that was just fine.
Yes, I'm going to briefly cut off Mark here. I'm going to promote this one time and one time only at the top of the chat there. I have a second channel where I cover things like movies and entertainment stuff, video games, etc. in my spare time when I'm doing other things or when I have free time. Most of the time is dedicated to this channel, though, and I just want to thank each and every one of you for joining right now. Make sure you hit that like button, hit that sub button if you are new, and you can go check out the second channel if you are interested. If not, whatever, all good, up to you. Let's get back into it. Thank you for being here.
And they said that after the Harper government, there were more CBSA full-time equivalents. After the Harper government, there was more money spent on the border. And even if that were not the case, this government has been in power for 9.5 years. And they hearken back to the Harper era as though they haven't had any time to make any changes. The only thing they've done is make change for the worse. They've increased the size of the public service by 40%. And somehow we're supposed to believe that, as the member for the NDP said, when Stephen Harper cut some back office positions in the CBSA, that's when the guns started flowing across and we had all this unregulated immigration. What a load of nonsense, Mr. Speaker. We have seen the stats. We have seen the stats. There's a 200% increase in the number of Canadians that have died of overdoses since this government took office in 2015. 47,000 Canadians. We've seen at the borders seizures of fentanyl doses more than triple between 2023 and 2024, rising from 239,000 doses to 839,000 doses. That is the record of this government. And we've also seen, because they've been so incompetent in managing the border, that now the provinces are feeling compelled right across the political spectrum to step up and do things on their own to patrol the border, even though that is not their mandate. They've said, well, if the Liberals and the NDP Liberals aren't going to do it, I guess we'll have to do it ourselves. Bob Canoe has said that he is going to be looking at conservation officers to help patrol the border because he recognizes it's so bad.
Conservation officers.
Danielle Smith has said she might have to use Alberta sheriffs. The Quebec government has proposed measures to bolster border security because it's a disaster. The numbers have shown exactly how this is trending, and it's trending in a direction where U.S. Border Patrol is encountering more and more Canadians, not Canadians, more and more people coming from Canada trying to get into the U.S. illegally. And now we have President-elect Trump who has said, you better fix it. The idea that somehow by saying, well, this is as serious as a heart attack, he's proposing 25% tariffs, and what should we do about it? The NDP says, ignore him. He's just blowing smoke. There's nothing wrong with our border. And if you address the border, you're somehow kowtowing to the president-elect. I'd say that Canadians had better get serious about what has been proposed. A 25% tariff would be devastating to our economy. So we better come up with a Canada First plan that addresses things like the fentanyl crisis, like the border crisis. We better come up with a plan, and I'm getting chirp from the Liberals. Their own Minister of Public Safety has admitted that they need to do better.
I got a point of order from the Honourable for Waterloo.
I apologize if he feels I was interrupting. I was just really fascinated to hear that the Conservatives actually do want to take.
Okay, that's again following a debate. The honourable member has less than a minute to finish up.
Well, thank you, Mr.
Just
Speaker.
shut her down.
I understand that they don't want to take. We saw this Prime Minister and the Minister of Public Safety roll on down to Mar-a-Lago. The idea that somehow us pointing out that there are issues. The Leader of the Opposition has been raising the issue of fentanyl and illegal drugs for over a year. It has nothing to do with Donald Trump. And so they can talk about Donald Trump and chirp all they want. Their leader, the Prime Minister and the Public Safety Minister, went down to Mar-a-Lago because they know that they have to take this matter seriously. And it's time that they started taking the issue of fentanyl and the border seriously right now, Mr. Speaker.
It's my duty to interrupt the proceedings at this time and put forthwith the question on the motion that is now before the House. Monsieur Lamoureux, seconded by Mr. Chang, move that the question be now put. If a member participating in person wishes the motion be carried or carried on division, or if a member of a recognized party participating in person wishes to request a recorded division, I invite them to rise and indicate it to the chair. The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Government House Leader.
Mr. Speaker, we request a recorded division.
So pursuant to Standing Order 45, the division stands deferred until later this day at the expiry of the time provided for oral questions. The House will now resume the remaining business under routine proceedings. We are under the rubric of motions. Motions, Mr. Massey, seconded by Mr. Julian, moves that it be an instruction to the Standing Committee on Industry and Technology that during its consideration of Bill C-27, an act to enact the Consumer Privacy Protection Act, the Personal Information and Data Protection Tribunal Act, and the Artificial Intelligence and Data Act, and to make consequential related amendments to other acts, the committee be granted the power to divide the bill into two pieces of legislation. Debate. The Honourable Member for Windsor West.
Mr. Speaker, and I'm pleased to rise on this motion to take advantage of an opportunity.
I'm going to interrupt just one quick second because I did forget to read the A and the B here. A, Bill C-27A, an act to enact the Consumer Privacy Protection Act, an act to enact the Personal Information Data Protection Tribunal Act, containing Part 1, Part 2, and the schedule to Section 2. And B, Bill C-27B, an act to enact the Artificial Intelligence and Data Act, pertaining to Part 3. Now it's debate and...
Holy, this guy's a rap god.
Mr. Speaker, and I thank you for reading the full element of the bill, and I'll talk a little bit about that as well, too. But as New Democrats, we're taking this opportunity to try to rescue part of a bill to protect Canadians' privacy. As the Conservatives and Liberals have been warring in their different camps over a number of different things, we have an important piece of legislation that has been drafted poorly but can be recovered. And that's what we're going to focus on, is this Parliament being able to rescue tens of thousands of dollars, multiple meetings over witnesses, and also doing what a variety of organizations, including the Canadian Chamber of Commerce and others that you would not seem to be naturally in the NDP camp, but are on this issue. And it's important to note, Mr. Speaker, is that all the petty politics going by the Liberals and Conservatives on this is actually at the expense of privacy of Canadians. And so specifically what I'm talking about is Bill C-27. And Bill C-27, Mr. Speaker, goes back actually to the year 2020 with regards to C-11, and it reemerged in 2022 in this chamber. 2022 in November, when the Liberals tabled an act to amend the Consumer Privacy Protection Act, the Personal Information and Data Protection Tribunal Act, and the Artificial Intelligence Data Act, and make consequential and related amendments to other acts. And what that meant, Mr. Speaker, is that the Liberals drafted a bill that was so encompassing and so problematic because they were willing to compromise personal privacy rights for the consumer industry and big tech and big other businesses at the expense of individual Canadian privacy. But we called them out at that, and the reason that we have this motion in front of you today was because a member for Burning New Westminster stood in this chamber and helped separate the actual bill to actually make sure that the privacy component of this, which should have been done separately, can still get done. And as Parliament winds down not only this session, but potentially in a future session, we still have time to protect Canadians' privacy, where the Liberals and Conservatives have no interest in this whatsoever. They would rather have their own games, and they would also sacrifice the privacy of Canadians. The bill was so poorly drafted. When I first saw it, I went to the minister, and I asked the minister back in 2022 to separate the bill. You do not have to actually compromise Canadians' privacy for the consumer interests, and they knew that. They knew that because their lobbyists, their friends, their CEOs, the big tech, all those elements were chirping in the minister's ear and giving him basically the political support to go ahead with this. And so when I said to the minister, separate the bill, let's do the privacy component first, they basically said that they couldn't do it, they didn't want to do it, and we proved that wrong in this chamber by separating the bill in a previous debate. And so here we are now, as New Democrats, understanding there's dozens and dozens and dozens of organizations that are calling for the personal protection of privacy, including the Privacy Commissioner, to get this done. Don't waste that work that is now being compromised by the games going on by the official opposition and the Liberals. And again, this bill was drafted so poorly, Mr. Speaker, that usually when bills go to committee, they usually have maybe a dozen at the most amendments. And of those amendments, there are usually a few that are very significant to the bill. Others could be language. This bill itself had over 240 amendments, I believe. Wow. Over 240 amendments that were to correct the problems with the bill. So what happened is we had the debates here in the House of Commons. We referred the bill to committee, and the minister shows up. He shows up after doing a lot of prancing around Canada about how great the legislation was and talking about the importance of artificial intelligence and how Canada has to deal with it, which we do agree with. But the reality is he didn't care at all, neither did the Liberals at all, about the privacy element. In fact, we saw elements of the bill to do the same thing to the Privacy Commissioner, which has been taking place in the Competition Bureau. And what I refer to that, Mr. Speaker, is when the Shaw-Rogers takeover took place, and we've seen the debacle that played out because New Democrats were the ones that opposed that and stood against that because we've seen it hasn't lowered prices, it's only laid off workers, and it's led to non-disclosure clauses from the people that got fired from Rogers, that the Liberals didn't care at all and created a tribunal over top of the Privacy Commissioner. And why that's important is a tribunal over the Competition Bureau actually, for doing their job, was sued by Rogers, or actually sued the process, they took it to court to do their due diligence, but the tribunal, which is appointed people from Liberals and Conservatives, then taxed our own Competition Bureau, I think it's $10 million to pay for the legal costs for Rogers for this just doing their job. So we didn't want the same thing as New Democrats of a privacy commissioner being overridden by political appointees by Liberals and Conservatives, because that's the history that I've seen here in this place over the 2 decades I've been here, is constant appointments of either the blue or the red team to the different positions of power with no oversight, no accountability, and leading to decisions against the public. So what we finally got was this bill coming back to committee. We had, I don't even know how many witnesses off the top of my head, but we went for a long period of time. And we heard how bad the legislation is drafted by some, and then some so desperate to have anything, they'll take anything, and they admitted basically it was a piece of garbage. That's basically what they said. We'll just take anything other than nothing. But most of those times, those are the interests that were tied into businesses and consumer rights for the industries versus that of those that are concerned with Canadians' personal privacy and protection. And we heard that constantly as the committee wound through all the different witnesses. We finally came back to a point, and it was interesting because the minister came to us at the very beginning of all those different witnesses, and he says, well, I got some amendments. And it turned out those amendments were just ideas. They weren't in any legislative format that we could deal with. They weren't in any legal terms. They didn't have the House of Commons or any of his department draft them. They were basically a set of ideas, and
taxation is theft.
didn't even make any sense in terms of the legislation. I don't think the minister even understood what, or probably doesn't to this day, amendments. So we get through the entire process. We fight over getting these amendments. So what does the minister really mean? Is he willing to compromise on the privacy commissioner and try not to neuter it? Is he willing to actually do the right things to even fix some of the elements of the AI that people are concerned about? But what I kept on asking was witness after witness is whether they thought they should actually split this bill. And the resounding answer was yes. Even from those that want to get the AI stuff done, there was no need to put the privacy commissioner in there. And again, I go back to the roots of this, and the roots of this was to undermine personal privacy of Canadians at the expense of businesses being able to access their data information and not be updated. So now we have an open hole right now, and we have all this work that's been done, but we're going to propose to send it back to committee with this motion to try to deal with it and see if this House can actually get something done for Canadians, because we spend a lot of time and money on this. And there's some really significant issues here. And why we're doing this is because we've been in consultation with many groups and organizations that still want to see our privacy protected. So we got to actually the hearings, clause by clause, partially of this. And we go through clause by clause with those amendments, over 200 amendments, as I mentioned. And we find that there is some elements there that we can actually work with, at least as the opposition members. And to credit to the Conservatives, to the Bloc, and ourselves, there were some elements that we could actually agree upon and work with. And the government altered some of their stuff too. But we still were stuck in a myriad of different problems. And the situation became so bad, Mr. Speaker, that the Liberals began to filibuster their own bill in committee because they didn't know what to do. And so the minister then said he would come back with further amendments, and we have not seen them to date. I raised this most recently a couple of weeks ago as we tried to plan out our session, and we still have not had the Liberals bring back any of those amendments. They're on the record promising them. They said that they're going to happen, but we still haven't been able to get over this tribunal issue. And the tribunal issue is something important that we can get done, and hence we're going to split this bill or see if there's interest in the House to do it, to see if we can rescue part of this legislation. And I think what's important to note...
All right, we got some breaking news coming out here, guys. Ottawa, suspicious package allegedly found at Parliament Hill. Emergency crews on site, buildings being cleared. I guess I will try and find updates as we get more here, but as of right now, it looks like they're shutting some blocks down, they're shutting certain areas down. Kinda crazy.
As these are distinct areas that require separate attention and specialized elsewhere. So again, we have that component that can go forward with support from the Privacy Commissioner in terms of a process. They're indifferent in terms of how legislation should be actually brought through the House of Commons and the Chamber, but at the same time they recognize that it's not the only way to do this. The minister didn't have to basically throw in everything he could into a bill to diminish privacy rights to distract Canadians, and that's really what this was about. We should never even started on the AI component without finishing the privacy component, and that could have been done ages ago, and it should have been done ages ago. The Canadian Internet Policy and Public Interest Clinic, they are actually called for separation of the bill, emphasizing the importance of ensuring that privacy laws and AI regulations receive individual, dedicated scrutiny, especially given their different implications for society and households. These organizations, among others, are also very much interested in moving it forward. And I mentioned as well, too, the Canadian Chamber of Commerce. They actually sent in support, believing that the legislation has to be separated. In the Canadian Chamber of Commerce, I had a chance to actually meet with them recently on a number of different issues, including the border issues, when they're really well aware, Mr. Speaker. I know the previous debate was about partially of CBSA officers, where I'm on the front line. I have 40% of Canada's daily trade go through my riding to the United States. And I can tell you, the New Democratic Party has been supporting also getting the training center, improving the mandate of CBSA officers. That includes actually they'll be able to seize
a suspicious package of friendship bracelets has appeared on Parliament Hill
right now, as well as ensuring that the 1932 Order in Council has been rescinded, and giving that, most importantly, the push to actually get the border officers, the 1,100 frontline officers, sniffer dogs, those that were doing the examination, are actually hired back by the Liberals when they were cut by the Conservatives. Yep. And then we had under COVID 2 tranches of not actually hiring workers, so they're 2,000 to 3,000 short right now in terms of our workers. And we believe, unlike the Conservatives and Liberals who have pushed for looking at apps like Arrive Canada and others to take over the workers on the border, because that's what they did. They went to more automation and other types of things. We believe the solution is right in front of us, and that's workers on the front line. Bring back the sniffer dogs. Bring back the workers that were fired and put them actually on the border where they should be. And that's also a way, I can tell you, helping to stop the drugs and the different types of paraphernalia, the car smuggling and all that from coming into Canada. And we can look at a number of different varied things, but again, this bill in particular, I want to go back to and talk about how the Canadian Chamber of Commerce is actually calling for this, because they understand that there's a difference when it comes to artificial intelligence, and that also of the privacy elements. So why this is important, not only just to individuals, it's also important for companies to understand how to protect Canadians' rules. And I can tell you, there are many Canadian companies in particular that want to follow rules, protect privacy, and do the right thing. And those companies should be rewarded versus some of the larger ones that we've seen with Meta, with the Facebook.
Yeah, this guy must have been given like a 20-minute slot to speak or something, I don't know. But while he's continuing to do that, the whole reason the stream is named what it is today, hold on, a $60 billion deficit. I know some of you might have already seen this from earlier, but if you're just joining us now, please take a listen to this.
Officials have leaked to the media that the deficit will be $60 billion or more. So is it going to be that, higher, or lower?
Mr. Perkins, because a Conservative filibuster has blocked the work of our Parliament.
Minister, the only filibuster is your unwillingness to produce the documents.
No,
but I would ask you a simple question. Is the deficit going to be higher or lower than the $60 billion your officials have leaked to the media?
I think that it is very important not to cast any doubt on Canada's financial credibility. So I want to take this opportunity to be very clear that Canada's fiscal position is strong
be above or below
and sustainable
$60 billion?
And continues,
yes or no? It's a simple question.
To be
Why won't you answer whether or not it'll be above or below
the
60
G7.
billion? Did you officially?
Christia, I think it's very important that you just answer the simple question. Is it more or less than $60 billion when they were told not to go over $40 billion?
Noting that it skipped the normal public consultation process and was introduced alongside the Digital Charter Implementation Act, whereas it should have been separated from the rest of Bill C-27 for substantial reworking. The authors suggest redrafting ADA, which should include genuine public consultation, looking to the European Union's Artificial Intelligence Act, engaging community advocates, researchers, lawyers, and representatives of at-risk populations. And the reason I say that, Mr. Speaker, with regards to that reference, is that was the due diligence and why this basically the minister laid an egg with this bill, and it was basically broken upon delivery as well, is because he didn't do the work that was necessary beforehand, consulting all the different organizations. So what you had, which is what Ottawa loves this so much, they have the backroom scurrying of all the lobbyists that go to the Conservatives and Liberals, and they all get paid for this. Their lawyers, their representations, getting the meetings and all those different things, and guess who the mass majority they are? They're Liberals and Conservatives. And they get all these appointments, they get all this lobbying going on, and then they start to steer influence if they can. Instead of having the public consultations, which you think would have been important.
So since nobody wants to listen to him talk, I'll promote it one more time. I do have a second channel, yes, where I cover things like movies and entertainment and video games, etc. So thank you very much if you guys did sub there. If you haven't, it's up to you. It's not political at all over there. I try to keep it separate. But it's just spare time stuff, things I could do in my spare time, whether it's reviewing a movie or playing a game or whatever the case is. But most of my time is dedicated to this channel. I want to thank you all for being here right now as this guy continues to ramble on, which it feels like he's been doing for the past hour, but it's only been about like 10, 15 minutes.
Then, aside from more debacle. And what you see in these groups and these organizations, Mr. Speaker, that are calling for what the NDP has been saying for a long period of time, in terms of, especially when I had the first meeting with the minister, is that why you...
He does have a very long tie on. That tie is, it just, yeah, it keeps going.
include Amnesty International, the Canadian section, BC Civil Liberties Association, Canadian Arab Federation, Canadian Civil Liberties Association, Canadian Muslim Public Affairs Council, Center for Digital Rights.
I actually started playing Indiana Jones. So there is about 2 hours of me playing it on the second channel. And I plan on playing more of it. So.
International Civil Liberties Monitoring Group, Inter Pares, Just Peace Advocates, McDonald-Laurier Institute, Minds Action Canada, Natural Union of Public and General Employees, NSTP Consulting Corp, Open Media, Privacy and Access Council of Canada, Response Marketing Association, Rideau Institute of International Affairs, Tech Reset Canada, and then there's a whole series of other individuals that go up to another 39 or 34 that I can actually put down here, but I won't read through them all because there's just too many. But Mr. Speaker, what it tells you when I read out those different organizations, a general consensus that this legislation is a complete, utter disaster the way it is. So what we can do now is what we've called for, and sections A and B of the motion, as you read, is A, an act to amend the Consumer Privacy Protection Act and Act of Personal Information Data Protection Tribunal Act containing Part 1 and Part 2 and Schedule 2 of the section, and then B, Section 27B.
All right, so because this guy keeps going on and on and on, we have something new that we can listen to. We have ministers speaking with reporters. It's our favorite person in the world here, Karina. I'm sure she's one of the many individuals that will be questioned here by reporters. Let's take a brief listen. A little break from the NDP babbling. We don't have any audio, though.
Get more respect or talk tougher to the federal government. Did you detect a change in tone in the way?
Tous les investissements qui sont
Why in French? Come on.
How late are you expecting to stay tonight regarding the supplementary estimates?
Well, it's a great question. My understanding is I think there are between 5 and 7 votes tonight, so that's an hour and a half of voting.
Have you confirmed NDP support?
Well, if they want to get support for dental care, then it's important to vote for this tonight.
And can this move into tomorrow?
No, it can't.
There are
So it sounds like there's going to be a vote for something to do with dental care. The reporters are talking too quiet. I figured this would have been better footage than that, so I'm not going to continue with that. But based on that right there, there might be some dental care bill coming out very soon.
An issue in which I would suggest to you the government has been fairly aggressive on in terms of addressing a number of different issues related
oh my
to
God,
the
it's
internet,
Kevin.
cybersecurity, protecting Canadians' data, AI, and so forth. What he's referring to is one piece of legislation, and I think that there's a great deal of merit in terms of looking at it in a holistic approach, and that there's, given what we have witnessed over the last number of months in terms of the House, we do have an opportunity at least to make a headway in areas that Bill C-27 is proposing, that if we were to split the bill, it could ultimately prevent one aspect from being able to pass, even if it's just setting a...
America doesn't want Quebec? Nobody wants Quebec. Only Quebec wants Quebec.
The Honourable Member for Windsor West.
Do know this, it's not advantageous for Canadians for the Liberals to flush all this down the toilet just because they really can't get their way at committee and because they want to actually neuter our privacy commissioner with a tribunal that will overreach and overstretch the actual the privacy commissioner. So the alternative that the Liberals have right now in place, and I don't know who else supports that, is basically we stumble around committee waiting for their amendments to come, which we don't even know and don't have, or we move ahead without them, and then we actually then have stalemate, and we try to get it to the other place where they have to actually deal with this bill in a matter of months when it's taken us over 2 years plus and going. So I say it's worth the effort, and I think the test of metal was done when the Speaker ruled to separate the bill. So this member doesn't have the expertise as a Speaker, but the Speaker allowed to separate the bill because they are different.
Yeah, the real French over in France wouldn't even want Quebec, so, like, nobody wants them.
Apparently they're different than that, but I'll respect the idea of trying to create this an opportunity to fix the legislation that should never have been crafted this way in the first place.
Here, here.
Questions and comments? Questions, commentaires? L'honorable député de
The Honourable Member for Abitibi-Témiscamingue. Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I'd like to thank my colleague, the member for Windsor West, for his speech and for bringing this issue up in the House. A year ago, I was on the Industry Committee, and we were talking about this issue, so it's taken a lot of patience. This bill, as soon as it was tabled, it was already out of date because ChatGPT came along subsequently. So my question is, why didn't the government decide to table a new C-27 on the digital charter? Because the legislation was already out of date when it was first introduced. The Honourable Member for Windsor West.
Member for Témiscamingue, who actually really did excellent work on this, and we worked together trying to see if we could fix the bill. That was the intent, is that we found ourselves in a situation where the government was particularly stubborn and didn't want to change, but we worked quite well together to try to find escape clauses and hatches. And we talked about this particular idea at that time as basically a backstop or a fail-safe to not waste basically 2 years of legislative work. So I agree with them that it really should have been done at that time, and if we went back in time, maybe we should have been more forceful not to try to make cooperation take place, because the minister just took advantage of that, basically going in the public and blaming us for basically his failures.
You stood alongside his failures, and you guys had the opportunity yesterday to prove that you do not back his failures and do not back him as a leader anymore. But guess what? You decided to vote for him. You guys are pathetic. You guys are idiots. Listen to Beetlejuice.
Come online. There was no interest from the federal government to deal with this. I wrote to the Privacy Commissioner and asked him to launch an investigation into Clearview AI, and what he found was that Clearview AI broke Canadian law. Yep. This was the moment when the Liberal government came forward to bring forward new privacy legislation. We actually thought that they would strengthen the Privacy Commissioner in this time of very troubling mass data theft of people's identity. The Privacy Commissioner told us the changes of the law, by putting this tribunal over him to undermine his work, would make it impossible for him to find a ruling against Clearview AI today. I think it's shocking that in the face of data thefts that we've seen with Cambridge Analytica, the rise of AI, the rise of facial recognition technology, that the government actually undermined the privacy rights of Canadians to help out corporate interests. I'd like to ask my honourable colleague, his thoughts on this. Good question.
The honourable member for Windsor West.
Thank you, and I thank the member for Timmins James Bay for the question, because this really gets into the political ideological difference between New Democrats. Don't where the bloc is. I think they're on the same page as us, and I don't know about the Conservatives and Liberals with where they're going. Is that we believe in a strong, independent privacy commissioner that can take on big business, can take on those that are abusing Canadian privacy, and we're not beholden to the Conservatives and Liberals' political appointments that they put on these boards and tribunal that can basically put the thumb down on the privacy commissioner like we've seen for the competition commissioner. So that's the ideological difference between the things. They want their political patronage appointments to actually rue the day, whereas we believe in a strong, independent privacy commissioner that answers the Canadians.
Time for the questions and comments. L'honorable député de...
The honourable member for Trois-Rivières. I'd like to thank my colleague, Bill.
I spent a week in Montreal, and it had to be one of the most wacko experiences I've ever had in my life. The hotel we stayed in was protesting the entire time. The McDonald's across the street was a 24/7 McDonald's loaded with crackheads all the time. The food was always terrible there too. I mean, it's McDonald's, so nothing to expect there. There was a stabbing down the block outside of a club. A young guy was stabbed and killed. Police were everywhere. I actually got stopped by an undercover officer trying to sell me drugs, and I handed him a cold McDonald's Junior Chicken and told him to have a good night. So, Montreal, yes, probably not the greatest place to go in all of Quebec. It's an absolute fucking crazy shithole.
This debate. So to the member, yes, there's some great lessons we can learn from there. We can't get anywhere, though, under the current context that's been created. And
And I'm sure there are nice Quebecers there. I'm sure there are a lot of nice people that live in Quebec. But when I was there, it was quite the opposite of that. I went to small businesses. I ate at mom and pa shops. A lot of the people that worked at those places were pretty rude. Not aggressive, but more or less rude. You could just tell by the demeanor, the way they talked, the way they looked at you, all that kind of stuff. They could tell you were not from that area very, very easily.
Speaker, I really wanted to underscore how important the work the member from Windsor West is. I mean, he's the dean of the NDP caucus, but also somebody who brings vast intelligence and experience to these kinds of issues. The reality is the Conservatives never dealt adequately with any of this. They were just a terrible government, and the Liberals have been dragging the puck. And so I wanted to ask my colleague, what would an NDP government do that is better than the failed Conservative policies that were absolutely abysmal, the worst government in Canadian history, and Liberals who basically won't do anything unless the NDP pushes them and forces them to get it done?
The honourable member for Windsor West.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The first and foremost of this particular element is the protection of the Privacy Commissioner Digital Charter of Rights would be a complement to actually not only just individual privacy in this world and this country as well, but more importantly as well, it helps clarify to small, medium-sized businesses that want to do the right thing, protect privacy, that have to compete against the unruly and the ones that want to abuse Canadian privacy. We've seen this from major chains like Tim Hortons and others, but we've also seen a lot of different spectacular ones of privacy and privacy breaches that have taken place where there's actually a black market for this. So what we would do is empower the Privacy Commissioner to make sure he has or she has the proper types of tools and necessary resources to do it, a digital charter of rights that's going to protect Canadians, and give those businesses that actually are doing the right thing the proper credit and support. And they're often small and medium-sized businesses. One of the reasons we believe in pharmacare and dental care so much is because it takes the pressure off them financially to help their employees. This, on top of that, would also provide them with the rules and how to cover themselves and how to do the right thing for their customers, because often those are your neighbors, your friends, and your family that are running those businesses, and they just want to do the right thing as opposed to the exploitation by Meta and others.
Resuming debate, the Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Government House.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Speaker. And the member raises what I would suggest to you is a very important issue in terms of the Internet and the threats that are out on the Internet, Mr. Speaker, in a number of different ways. He spent a great deal of his time just focused on C-27, understandably. That's what the motion is actually about. But as a government, I can indicate to you, Mr. Speaker, that we have taken a very holistic approach at dealing with all aspects of the internet in forms of legislation and regulations. Quite often what you see within legislation is a framework that is absolutely essential, Mr. Speaker, in order to support healthy and strong regulations, ultimately then to protect the interests of Canadians. It's been somewhat frustrating, as the member gets frustrated when he talks about what's taking place in committees. Here on the floor of the House of Commons, it has also been frustrating. The member made reference to being C-27 being held up in committee. But he tried to pass the blame in regards to it's the government. You know, it's interesting, the government, and one of the biggest differences between the government today than the government that was there while Stephen Harper was Prime Minister, is that we are very much open to ideas, constructive criticism, and looking at ways in which we can improve legislation. And that means, Mr. Speaker, that we have been open to amendments and changes. And we have seen a number of recommendations. But we have also seen an extensive filibuster on Bill C-27. And it's not just government members. We have seen opposition members, Mr. Speaker. Much like we see filibustering now taking place on other aspects of safety for Canadians. Today, I think, what are we, 6 weeks, 7, 8 weeks now, where we have seen Conservative filibuster here on the floor of the House of Commons. And we have other pieces of legislation dealing with the internet, Mr. Speaker, that the Conservatives are continuing to filibuster. And what I'm referring to is Bill C-63. Legislation, Mr. Speaker, that deals with things such as intimate images that are being spread on the internet without consent. We're talking about child exploitation on the internet. We're talking about serious issues that Canadians are having to face, and that's C-63, that we cannot even get to committee because the Conservative Party has made the decision to filibuster on the floor of the House of Commons. So when the member talks about C-27, I can assure the member opposite that the government is in fact very keen on the legislation. We do not see how it is that Canadians would benefit by splitting the legislation, because both aspects, as throughout the legislation, is really important to Canadians. And it should ultimately be looked at. And where it is that we can improve, we are open to that. We have clearly demonstrated that, Mr. Speaker. But we do need to see a higher sense of cooperation, whether it's inside the chamber and dealing with Bill C-63 or dealing with C-27 inside committee. We also had C-26 that dealt with cybersecurity, Mr. Speaker. As I say, the government is very much aware of what's happening on the internet and the responsibility that we have as legislators to advance legislation that helps establish framework that will in fact protect the interests of Canadians. Earlier I made reference, Mr. Speaker, to a trip that I had taken to the Philippines in the last 5 days. One of the companies that we were able to visit was actually a Canadian company, OpenText. OpenText is the name of the company, Mr. Speaker, employing 1,500 plus people. And we got to sit in a room where they have this big, huge monitor of the world. And they talk about how threats to infrastructure and to individuals occur every second Madam Speaker. They're talking about a trillion type of a number in terms of computer threats that are occurring on a monthly basis. They can tell where it's coming from and where it's going to. A very interesting presentation. As a government, no government has invested more on the issue of AI than this government has, Mr. Speaker. Recognizing the potential good, but there's also extreme harm that's out there, Mr. Speaker. When you think in terms of data banks, whether it's government data banks, things such as Canada Revenue at the national level, you can think of healthcare records at the provincial level. You can talk about the Tim Hortons or the private companies and the data that they acquire during their applications, Mr. Speaker. The amount of information about Canadians, the individual on the internet, is incredible. How technology has changed the lives of each and every one of us, Mr. Speaker, whether we know it or we don't. Take a look in terms of the number of cameras that are out in public, in our public streets, malls, you name it, Mr. Speaker. The number of interactions that we have on a weekly, let alone a daily basis, whether it's banking information, very sensitive information that is out there, doing medical reports.
We have a point of order. The honourable member for Timmins James Bay.
Speaker, it's almost Christmas, and the honourable member's already given us 20-some minutes this morning. Now we have to listen to him again. Could you maybe consider a way of giving us a Christmas gift to all of us? And that
I know that sort of falls into debate. Every honourable member has the right to speak in order, just like everyone else. And even though we're really happy to hear the honourable member for Winnipeg Centre, Winnipeg North to come and speak before us. Just a reminder that we will be interrupting in about 5 minutes. The honourable member for Winnipeg North.
You know, I take advantage of what it is that the Prime Minister has said to me, and that is that he wants me to reflect the type of ideas and thoughts and concerns that the people of Winnipeg North have. So whether it's here on the floor of the House of Commons or the National Liberal Caucus or even, very rarely, but at times, in standing committees, Liberal members of the caucus really do believe that it's important that we take ideas and thoughts from our constituents to Ottawa, Mr. Speaker, so that when we present legislation, when we present budgets, when there's discussions that take place in our standing committees, or there's discussions that take place within our caucus, that it is a true reflection of what it is that Canadians as a whole are thinking and wanting the government to take actions on. And that is the reason why we see legislation like C-27, because I can tell members opposite that Canadians are very much concerned about identity theft through the internet, Mr. Speaker. They're very much concerned about privacy. They want to know that the government is going to be there to protect their privacy, Mr. Speaker. That's why we are enhancing.
Listen to this guy. The government to protect your privacy. Oh my God. Are you kidding me? The government is going to protect you, guys. Remember that.
To Canadians.
Holy.
That even if the Conservatives are more concerned about playing games, about filibustering, whether it's on the floor of the House or in our standing committees, that we will continue to take actions to support Canadians. Mr. Speaker, in fact, you know, it was interesting. Just last week, the Minister of Innovations and Science and Industry announced the launch of the Canadian Artificial Intelligence Safety Institute. Mr. Speaker, that's to bolster Canada's capacity to address AI safety risks. Further
downloading new NPC update. I need the government to protect me. Please govern me harder.
We have a legislative responsibility in which we are advancing. We are also prepared to put in budgetary dollars to ensure that the interests of Canadians, first and foremost, are being protected. As a Conservative Party is more focused on being...
Yeah, doesn't everybody feel safer with Kevin being the head of this attack here on AI and safety on the internet?
...to support Canadians, whether it is through budgetary measures, legislative measures, and ensuring that the issues that are of concern to them are in fact being reflected in Ottawa in many different ways, Mr. Speaker. And when you think in terms of the advancement of the internet and the issues that have come out of that, that's why, as a government, we have brought forward several, not one, but several pieces of legislation, Mr. Speaker. Legislation that is there to protect children. Legislation that is there to protect our economy. Think of those business transactions that take place every day, Mr. Speaker. Protecting the interests of Canadians is a priority with this government, Mr. Speaker. Advancing the issue of AI and the way in which it is being used in a positive way. Looking at ways in which we can ensure that there's a heightened sense of safety on the internet. Looking at internet security, Mr. Speaker, as a priority. Because by doing that, by providing the funds, by supporting it through legislative measures that establish the framework, it makes a difference. We want Canadians to know that as a government, we are there to protect their interests when it comes to information that's gathered on the internet, when it comes to cyber threats that are out there that are very real, that we will be there, Mr. Speaker, today and tomorrow to protect those.
Are you sure about that, Kevin?
The daily routine of business.
Oh,
Moving on
Greg
to
is here,
declarations
guys.
by members.
Emperor Greg has entered the building.
Honourable member from Aurora Oak Ridges, Richmond Hill.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Today on Human Rights Day, we celebrate the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, a commitment to the dignity, equality, and freedom of every person. Yet, women's rights are under attack, from the morality police in Iran to the silencing of women in Afghanistan and restrictive abortion laws in the U.S. These injustices remind us that women's rights are human rights. Canada's commitment to human rights extend beyond our border. At the UN this year, we announced initiatives to protect the sexual and reproductive health and rights of women and girls. We continue to empower Afghan women through education, while sanctioning Taliban and Iranian officials responsible for gender apartheid. At home, Canada must continue to uphold our Charter of Rights and Freedoms. The notwithstanding clause must only be used in exceptional circumstances, not at the whim of a populist leader. As Liberals, we stand firmly for our Charter and for equal rights for all. By joining with others to stand up for our rights, our future, right now, we can make the vision of dignity, equality, and freedom for all people, including women, a reality. Thank you.
The Honourable Member for Charlebourg-Haute-Saint-Charles. Mr. Speaker, as we enter the holiday season, it's fitting to take a moment to express our gratitude to those who work to make... Oh, sorry, if I may start again. Something in my mouth.
Ew.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, as we enter the holiday season, it's fitting to take a moment to express our gratitude to those who work to make our community a better place. Today, I'd like to extend my heartfelt thanks to all the community organizations in Charlebourg-Haute-Saint-Charles for their commitment, generosity, and unfailing dedication. Your actions transform the lives of so many families and individuals. Whether supporting the less fortunate, organizing festive events, or creating spaces for sharing and mutual aid, you are the beating heart of our community. Thanks to you, smiles blossom, bonds are forged, and the holiday spirit shines through. Your work goes beyond just the actions we can see. It warms hearts and shows us the true meaning of solidarity. You are artisans of hope and your impact is priceless. On behalf of all the residents of Charlebourg-Haute-Saint-Charles, I say a huge thank you. Let's continue together to make our community a place where no one is forgotten. I wish you all a very Merry Christmas filled with joy, peace, and precious moments with your loved ones.
The Honourable Member from Brampton Centre.
Mr. Speaker, last week Canada voted yes on the National UN General Assembly resolution entitled Peaceful Settlement of the Question of Palestine. Canada joined 156 other nations calling for Israel's complete withdrawal from the Palestinian territories. The resolution demanded that Israel comply with international law, cease all settlement activities, and evacuate settlers from the occupied Palestinian territory. Canada's vote reaffirmed our long-standing policy in calling for the realization of the rights of the Palestinian people, primarily the right to self-determination and the right to their independent state. Consistent with that policy, and to demonstrate support for the resolution, it is now time for Canada to recognize the state of Palestine.
Not one person clapped.
Today to pay tribute to Mr. Serge Godon, an exceptional member of our community in 20.
That was brutal.
Call a super volunteer. He's been involved in numerous community activities in the Mauricie region since the early 1980s.
My God. I don't know what he was saying, but I think my couch started floating at one point.
The Saint Louis de France and Sainte Bernadette Scouting Associations, the Roland Leclerc Centre, Les Artisans de la Paix, and the list goes on. But the commitment that impresses me the most is that of Noël Ducoeur, formerly Noël du Pauvre, with which he has been involved for 44 years. And today it's with his children and grandchildren, all of whom were introduced to volunteering at a young age, that he continues to make a positive contribution to our community. Mr. Godon, we need more people like you all over Quebec, people who make a difference in people's everyday lives. Thank you for your exceptional involvement. The Honourable Member for Saint-Léonard-Saint-Michel.
Speaker, this past weekend, as part of the Canadian delegation to the Vatican City, I had the honor and privilege to attend the induction of His Eminence Frank Cardinal Leo into the College of Cardinals, presided by His Holiness Pope Francis at St. Peter's Basilica. Cardinal Leo is the 18th Canadian to be inducted into the College of Cardinals. Among his many accomplishments and important positions held, I am particularly proud to say that he taught religion at Collège Reine-Marie, located in my riding. A Montreal-born shepherd of Italian descent, he faithfully served the Montreal Catholic community for over a decade before being appointed as Archbishop of Toronto. His elevation to Cardinal is a testament to his years of dedication and leadership in both local and global faith communities. Our delegation, led by the Minister for the Federal Economic Development Agency of Southern Ontario, played a key role in representing Canada, our communities, and all Italian Canadians in this important and historic event. Congratulations, Cardinal Leo.
The Honourable Member for Leeds-Grenville, Thousand Islands and Rideau Lakes.
On Saturday, the Archbishop for Toronto was inducted into the College of Cardinals by Pope Francis at St. Peter's Basilica. I was honoured to attend the consistory with the Canadian delegation on behalf of the Leader of the Official Opposition. Now, witnessing this historic ritual was a deeply spiritual experience and a moment of profound inspiration, hope, and promise. Born in Montreal to immigrant parents, Cardinal Leo was ordained a priest for the Archdiocese of Montreal. He also served in the Holy See's diplomatic service, taught theology and spirituality. Appointed Archbishop of Toronto in 2023, he oversees major ecclesiastical institutions and Catholic organizations. As one of the youngest cardinals, he said the church outreach must start from the heart and the church must be a guide, but listen to what young people are saying. This is a proud moment for Canadians. Congratulations, Cardinal Leo. Viva Cristo Rey.
The Honourable Member for Richmond Hill.
Mr. Speaker, Richmond Hill is making important progress in affordable housing. The Richmond Hill Council recently adopted a community improvement plan for affordable housing and sustainable design, one of the 9 initiatives as part of the $31 million Housing Accelerated Fund agreement that the city has with the federal government. This new program addresses housing affordability and environment sustainability by providing incentives for developers to kickstart affordable rental housing projects with ensuring such housing is designed and operated to reduce greenhouse gas emission over the long term. This underscores how our Housing Accelerated Fund is empowering municipalities like Richmond Hill to meet local housing needs, and I am proud my city is moving forward with key housing initiatives such as this one. Together, we are building a Richmond Hill where everyone and every family has a place to call home. Merry Christmas and happy holiday to all. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The honourable member for Mississauga, Aaron Mills.
Mr. Speaker, today I rise with a heavy heart to recognize the passing of Umar Zia. He was a loving father, husband, son, and brother. He dedicated his career to service in our community as a teacher in Peel schools and most recently as principal in the Woodlands Secondary School. Omar was a mentor to so many young people in our community. He was breaking barriers and he was an unwavering advocate for special education, for anti-racism, volunteerism, and youth. I had the privilege of working with him over the years, and you could see the compassion that he brought every single day to work. Last week, he sadly passed away at the age of 49. This weekend, we gather to mourn, share stories, and say goodbye to our friend.
Guys, I can't lie to you. Statements by members has to be, I say it every time, it has to be the worst part of the entire stream. Like, we just want to get to question period. We just want to hear what everybody has to say, even though it's probably going to be the same things they said yesterday and the week before that. Christ, sometimes it's things they've mentioned a month ago, and they're doing it again. But statements by members, I think I lose IQ points. I think my brain slowly melts out my ears. Oh, we got Brock.
NDP-Liberals, crime and chaos has taken over our streets and communities. This past Sunday, Alicia Brooks was tragically gunned down by her boyfriend, a known serial abuser. As she was taking her final breath, this monster stood over her dead body and yelled at her. The accused, despite a history of gun possession, breaking and entering, weapon prohibition orders, and assaulting other women, was allowed to live in a halfway house. This devastating loss is yet another glaring example of the NDP-Liberal government's failure to protect Canadians by prioritizing criminals over victims. This criminal should have never been free to harm anyone. Canadians are urgently calling for bail reform to allow law enforcement to do their job and protect communities. Yet this Justice Minister ignores these claims and claims reform has already been achieved. How many more lives must be lost before this government finally takes action? Only a Conservative government will keep violent criminals behind bars and bring home safe streets.
The honourable member for Surrey Newton.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. November 29th marked a significant milestone in Surrey's history as Surrey Police Service officially took command from the RCMP. The transition reflects the community's evolving needs for public safety. I extend my congratulations to the Surrey Police Service as they assume this critical responsibility. At the same time, I want to express my deepest gratitude to the RCMP for their dedicated service to the City of Surrey. Their unwavering commitment to the safety and well-being of the residents has been exemplary and appreciated by all. As we move forward, let us honor the legacy of the RCMP while supporting
the RCMP
of community policing.
If you guys are new here, make sure you hit that like button, hit that sub button. Thank you very much for joining. We are about to get into question period very soon.
Issue that undermines public trust and accountability, namely the member for Edmonton Centre and his involvement with Global Health Imports, a company he co-owned, falsely presented himself as Indigenous-owned in order to exploit government procurement programs designed to benefit Indigenous communities. More troubling is that the Minister of Indigenous Services ignored clear warnings from her own auditors about rampant fraud and abuse. In the typical Ottawa Knows Best fashion, the Minister prevented auditors from contacting businesses directly during verification investigations. Instead, they were forced to submit their inquiries to the department, which would then respond to the companies. Despite the weakened audit process, the minister has been forced to remove 1,100 businesses from the Indigenous Business Directory, highlighting the extent to which the Liberals have allowed things to spiral out of control. Canadians have had enough. It's time to allow voters to put an end to this incompetent government.
The honourable member from Central Okanagan, Similkameen Nicola.
Mr. Speaker, when you think about it, this parliament resembles Charles Dickens' A Christmas Carol. First, Canadians were visited by the ghost of the NDP past. It was the current NDP leader who made such a ruckus and tore up his costly NDP-Liberal coalition agreement, declaring the Prime Minister was too weak, too selfish, and too beholden to corporate interests to fight for people. Last night, the ghost of NDP present appeared. After vowing to defend workers' rights, even if that meant toppling the government, the NDP leader humiliated himself and his caucus by standing with the Prime Minister. So much for having the courage of their convictions. And we all know the ghost of the NDP future is busy securing his own pension at the expense of all Canadians. Bah humbug, I say. Mr. Speaker, Canadians want to put an end to this NDP-Liberal fiscal nightmare. Only a carbon tax election and a common-sense Conservative government will bring home lower prices and better results for Canadian workers. And as Tiny Tim observed, God bless us, everyone, except perhaps this costly coalition. Merry Christmas, Mr. Speaker.
The honourable member for Ottawa Centre.
Speaker, today on Human Rights Day, I'm pleased to recognize the important work of scholars at risk programs at Carleton University, University of Ottawa, and around.
I've got a solid feeling today is going to be a heated day because everybody wants to know the number. Everybody wants the exact deficit number. Freeland was asked at a meeting, a caucus meeting, and she jumped all around the question. She danced all around, she pushed it away, and she might as well have just blamed it on Stephen Harper or something like that at that point. But, man, today might be very interesting. We are right now in statements by members. We will be getting into question period very, very soon. Do not go anywhere.
And our democracy. We must continue to support initiatives like Scholars at Risk that uphold Canada's values on human rights on the global stage. Thank you.
The honourable member for Vancouver, Kingsway.
Yes, well, we learned yesterday that Nosferatu can actually count to 6. The Liberals can count to 6.
Raised by a single mom, John overcame great challenges to rise to the highest levels of public office. His political career actually started in this place, staffing NDP MPs. In 1991, he left to assume important roles in the BC NDP government, ending as Chief of Staff to the Premier. John entered elected office as an MLA in...
Yeah, I do believe they did announce that it was going to be officially, like the number will be officially announced on the 14th to 16th or whatever. But the Conservatives are going to be hammering them nonstop to get this number out earlier. They want to know what it is because from what the leaks have said, it's possibly upwards to the 60 billion plus range, and they weren't supposed to go over 40 billion. Just take that in mind. They had $40 billion, and they went 20 plus billion over. Pure Liberals at their finest.
The honourable member for Drummond. The Iris Gala, our annual celebration of Quebec cinema, shone a spotlight on our homegrown talent again this year. Gatineau director Ariane Louis-XVI was the night's big winner for her film Humanist Vampire Seeking Consenting Suicidal Person, which is much more than just its brilliant title. This dark comedy saw her win Best Film, Best Debut Film, and Best...
Yes, my apologies. We have to give another $5 billion to Brazil.
Director for The Nature of Love. While Theodore Perret and Ariane Castellanos were named Performers of the Year. But the highlight of the evening was the tribute to director Denis Villeneuve, who made us so proud of his talent, and it was so moving to see how much he was touched by the honour. The Iris Gala once again reminded us that, per capita, Quebec produces some of the finest filmmakers and artists in the world. And above all, it was a reminder of the importance of maintaining adequate funding for cinema from our public institutions, as this government has promised on numerous occasions. Long live Quebec cinema.
The honourable member for Stormont Dundas, South Glengarry.
Canadians now know that all of the NDP's tough talk is worthless. Yesterday, they voted against a non-confidence motion in the Liberals that used the NDP leader's very own words against him. It meant nothing when he said he'd ripped up his coalition deal with the Prime Minister. It meant nothing when he said, quote, the Liberals are too weak, too selfish, and too beholden to corporate interest to fight for people. And it meant nothing when he looked striking union workers in the eyes and told them just last month, quote, if there's ever any vote in Parliament that in any way impacts your rights, we're going to vote no. Whether that's a confidence vote or not, whether that vote triggers an election or not, I'm telling the Liberals right now, you're never going to count on us if you're going to take away the rights of workers. Well, the NDP did exactly the opposite yesterday, and Canadians know why, because just minutes ago, the Liberals and NDP teamed up to cancel the idea of the election happening before the NDP leader gets his $2.3 million pension. Because here's the deal. The NDP leader gets his pension, the Prime Minister gets power, and Canadians get the bill.
Those were some fighting words. Look at Elizabeth hobbling around. Is that Elizabeth? No, that's not. That's one of the Liberal Party. Isn't it? Yeah, okay. Never mind.
Mr. Speaker, for years the Conservative leader has lectured Canadians about the virtue of tax cuts. Yet, when our government introduced a GST tax break to help Canadians, what did they do? The Conservatives voted against a tax break. It's like having a doctor who wouldn't accept their own medical advice. The Conservative leader calls himself a champion for affordability, but when the time comes, he turns his back and to give Canadians a real break. So who does the Conservative leader want a tax break for, Mr. Speaker? Well, that would be his rich corporate donors. Time and time again in this House, Mr. Speaker, when it's about supporting Canadians, we hear silly slogans, bumper sticker solutions. On this side of the House, we are absolutely 100% here for Canadians.
Oral questions.
Here we go.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition. Mr. Speaker, the Prime Minister is weak and he's lost control. He's lost control of our borders, of our freedom, of finances, and he's also lost control of his ministers, indeed. We have learned that there is a squabble going on between the Minister for Finance, who wants a huge $40 billion deficit, and the Prime Minister, who wants a great deficit, a steroid-infused deficit that goes beyond $40 billion. Who's going to win this squabble, Mr. Speaker? The Right Honourable Prime Minister. Mr. Speaker, when a government delivers dental care to seniors throughout the country, it's the Canadians who win. When the government delivers a tax break for Canadians over the next 2 months, Canadians win. When we are here to invest in food for children in schools, children and parents throughout Canada win. Canadians will not win when the Conservative leader votes against all these measures and refuses to help Canadians and only cares about his own future, not the future of Canadians.
Shout out to Tim. What an absolute legend.
The Minister for Finance does not agree. She promised that deficits would not go beyond $40 billion. She stated that she was against the little Christmas electoral bauble to the tune of $6 billion. But the Prime Minister imposed this inflationist policy upon her. He admits that deficits fuel inflation. And that is the reason for which they have promised to keep deficits to $40 billion. Will he keep his promise? Yes or no?
I was about to say that earlier. Freeland has already started non-stop moving.
Mr. Speaker, the person in this room who is against helping Canadians is the Leader of the Opposition. He's voted against a tax break for Canadians. He voted against dental care, against food in schools, against investments in electric batteries, against investments that we are creating for clean energy and for more jobs in Canada. The Leader of the Opposition is against measures that actually help Canadians because all he cares about is himself. He doesn't care about Canadians.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
This weak Prime Minister has lost control of the borders, lost control of immigration, lost control of spending, debt, and inflation, and now he's lost control of his own cabinet. We've learned in the Globe and Mail today that his finance minister is having her people speak out against him. She wants a large deficit of $40 billion. He, on the other hand, wants an even larger deficit on steroids, bigger than $40 billion. We know that Canadians are going to lose from all this inflation, but which one of those two is going to win?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, Canadians lose when the Conservative leader votes against a dental plan for seniors. Canadians lose when he stands against a tax break for all Canadians over the next few months. Canadians lose when he blocks a school food program that's going to save parents $800 on groceries while putting more food in kids' bellies. Every single time the Leader of the Opposition gets up in this House, he stands against supports for Canadians, against growing the economy, against supporting a better future for all Canadians, because he's only in it for himself.
That's right.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Oh, Trudeau.
Well, it's not clear that the finance minister is actually in it with him. She said, according to the Globe and Mail, the Prime Minister's office has given internal direction for an aggressive and possibly costly policy agenda that threatens to blow past spending targets she has already publicly stated for the government. She promised the deficit would be capped at $40 billion, acknowledging that if it went over, it would cause even more inflation. That means hungry Canadians lined up at food banks. So once again, will the government meet the minister's promise to keep the deficit under $40 billion?
Yes or no?
Probably not.
Prime Minister.
Speaker, while we once again hear the Leader of the Opposition talking down Canada's economy, talking down Canadians, the Bank of Canada, it looks like it's going to be decreasing.
He's not talking down Canadians, he's talking down you and your government and the piss-poor job you guys have done over the past decade.
Is also perplexed because he doesn't let his own MPs speak out on anything that he doesn't stamp and approve. He has people follow them around with tape recorders so that they don't speak to media about anything that he doesn't pre-approve. That's not being Canadians' voices in this place, Mr. Speaker.
You were doing so very well for the first number of questions in terms of members respecting that only one of their colleagues at a time had the floor. I'll ask members to please withhold their comments and let the one member speak and the one member answer. The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Mr. Speaker, this Prime Minister has admitted that deficits drive inflation. His minister admitted the same thing. That's why she said the deficit would not go above $40 billion. That was her guardrail. They weren't going to smash into that guardrail. She's like a bus driver saying she's going to come just short of hitting that $40 billion guardrail, and then some crazy lunatic comes in, grabs the steering wheel, and jerks it sharp to the left through the guardrail. Does he realize there's 41 million Canadians that are going to go off the cliff in that bus?
Order. Order.
We're already off the cliff, Pierre.
Colleagues, the longer I take to get order in this place, the shorter question period in terms of the number of questions we'll have to ask.
Colleagues.
I ask for
Colleagues, please.
Discipline. The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, while the Leader of the Opposition continues to talk down Canadians and the Canadian economy and indeed Canada, let me once again put it on the record. Canada is the best country in the world. And we, as Canadians, are stepping up, got us through the pandemic. Canadians got us through the challenge of high inflation. Canadians will keep building a positive future for themselves by being there and showing up for each other. Unlike the Leader of the Opposition, who's voted against every measure that has been put on the table to support Canadians over the past years and continues to be in it only for himself.
The Honourable Member for Bailleul-Chambly. Mr. Speaker, in the context of bullying and religious practices in schools, where people are asked to move to leave space for prayer, the Minister for Immigration says that the Premier of Quebec is always attacking Muslims. He keeps talking about the freedom of expression, but he seems to find it difficult to tell the difference between Notre Dame in Paris and a park in Montreal. What does the Prime Minister have to say about this? Is he for or against this kind of statement?
What?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister. Mr. Speaker, on this side of the House, we will always defend individual rights and freedoms and the Charter of Rights and Freedoms, the right to believe and to express oneself is something that our government will always defend. Of course, we will continue to protect these rights throughout our country. The Honourable Member for Bailleul-Chambly. For a bit more details, it's not a question of secularism versus one religion, but versus all religions. The vast majority of Muslims in Quebec are perfectly happy, integrated, and of course welcome in Quebec. The secularism of state institutions is there and is necessary for equality for all. Can the Prime Minister at least ask his minister to wait to see what the government of Quebec will do before he starts self-immolating in indignation? The Right Honourable Prime Minister. Mr. Speaker, Quebec is like all Canadians, cherish individual rights and freedoms, the freedom of expression, the freedom of belief and credence, the right and freedom to assemble. We have fundamental rights and freedoms that we will always defend. I understand that sometimes a community may be attacked, as we see sometimes with politics and policies throughout the country, but here the Liberal federal government will always defend individual freedoms.
The Honourable Member from Burnaby South.
Mr. Speaker, get this. The Conservatives bring in a tax cut for the richest CEOs corporations, costing Canadians $60 billion, but they vote against taking the GST off of home heating and diapers. And the Prime Minister sided with them. Why does the Prime Minister side with the Conservatives and big corporations against working people?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Speaker, we were equally puzzled when the Conservatives voted against a tax break for Canadians for the next few months. People are facing challenges right now, counting their pennies at the grocery store as they try to make ends meet. And this Parliament stepped
Counting
up.
their pennies at the grocery store, trying to make ends meet. Oh, Trudeau. Oh,
forced
buddy.
his MPs to vote against a tax break for Canadians. So even though he wanders around the country talking about taxes, hanging out with certain questionable diagolon folks, he continues to vote against the interests of Canadians.
Alors, s'il vous plaît.
Order, please. Order. The Honourable Member for Burnaby South.
Dead.
Mr. Speaker, make it make sense. The healthcare system is collapsing and the Prime Minister is sitting on his hands.
Oh my God, Jagmeet, you're such an idiot.
Colleagues,
I can't quite hear what...
Jagmeet acknowledges that the ship is sinking, but is helping the captain continue to sink the ship.
Order, please. I ask the Honourable Member for Burnaby South to start his question again.
Prime Minister's excuses instead.
Make it make sense, Mr. Speaker. The healthcare system is collapsing and the Prime Minister is sitting on his hands. Currently, 7 times out of 10, François Legault encourages Quebecers to pay for their healthcare. Does the Prime Minister find this acceptable? If so, why? And why is he abandoning people? The Right Honourable Prime Minister. Mr. Speaker, we will always respect provincial jurisdictions. We have also invested $200 million. We will invest $200 billion over the next years in healthcare throughout the country to deliver a greater number of general physicians with stronger healthcare, better mental health care, and better support for our workers. We are working for the healthcare system. We are here to defend our public healthcare system, and we are here to work hand in hand with provinces who want to deliver for better healthcare for all.
The Honourable Member for Thornhill.
We know the Prime Minister has lost control of spending, and now we see he's lost control of his own minister. We have a finance minister who won't tell us what the deficit is, and a Prime Minister who doesn't think about monetary policy, and that seems like a match made in heaven. But then again, maybe not. The Globe and Mail reports that, quote, tensions have risen between the Prime Minister's office and the Finance Minister's department, saying that the current dynamic appears to be similar to what happened with Bill Morneau before he quit. The Prime Minister bullies females and he bullies finance ministers, and now he's bullying a female finance minister. How much longer is she going to put up with that? Yeah.
Uh-oh. The blueberry has stood up.
Order, please.
Members to take their seats. The Honourable Member from Lakeland, I'll ask her, please, to not take the floor unless recognized. The Honourable Deputy Prime Minister and Minister of Finance.
Mr. Speaker, on this side of the House, we are united in working
Uh-oh.
and Canadians.
Just look at the people sitting around her. Look at their expressions, look at their faces when she speaks. It says they're all united. Some of them nodded. Most of them had stern faces that looked pretty disapproving.
Which would be one question. I'm going to ask members to control themselves. The Honourable Deputy Prime Minister and the Minister of Finance from the top, please.
Mr. Speaker, on this side of the House, we are united in working hard for Canada and Canadians. And in fact, Mr. Speaker, the only would-be bullies in this House are directly opposite. But I am very comfortable standing up to them. I look forward, together with my colleagues, to tabling the Fall Economic Statement on Monday in this House. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Order. 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 The Honourable Member.
Greg's gonna mute it.
The Honourable Member for Thornhill.
So
Maybe
awkward.
not.
I don't know why why the finance minister takes all of this abuse from the prime minister. She told Canadians that the deficit wouldn't go past $40 billion. That was her own self-imposed guardrail. Now she says everything's fine as her political career collapses, and so does her credibility, all because of this prime minister. 5 senior Liberal veterans and 3 political staffers confirmed to the Globe that the tensions have risen between her office and the PMO over spending. These are the same people who last summer said that she couldn't communicate. We know what the Prime Minister thinks of her, but why does she still have confidence in him?
The Honourable Deputy Prime Minister and Minister of Finance.
Mr. Speaker, on this side of the House, we are united. And on this side of the House, we recognize what a privilege it is every single day to work hard for Canada and Canadians and to defend the national
What's going on here?
That is what we are focused on every single day. And I would urge the MPs opposite to remember, this is a challenging time in Canada and the world. It is not a time for cheap partisan games.
The Honourable Member from Thornhill.
It's the finance minister who said over and over again that she would not go over her self-imposed guardrail of a $40 billion deficit. Now the parliamentary budget officer says that's yet another broken Liberal promise. We have no idea who's in the driver's seat anymore, driving Canadians through that $40 billion guardrail off of a cliff as they pay more in inflationary spending on the backs of struggling Canadians. What we do know is that Canadians ought to take her driver's license away. I can give her another opportunity to prove that she can communicate. She can stand up here and tell us what the deficit is at the moment.
Tell us.
The Honourable Deputy Prime Minister.
Tell us, you spineless blueberry.
Mr. Speaker, I look forward to tabling the fall economic statement in this House on Monday. And in the fall economic statement, we will show that the government is maintaining its fiscal anchor, specifically reducing the federal debt as a share of the economy over the medium term. In addition, I expect the debt to GDP ratio we projected in the spring budget for fiscal year 23-24 will be met. Canada has the lowest debt to GDP ratio in the G7, the lowest deficit in the G7. This is good news for Canadians.
The Honourable Member for Bellechasse-les-Échemins-Lévis. Unable to table a single balanced budget in 9 years, unable to keep the promise to keep the deficit under 40 billion, the Finance Minister is above all unable to convince her leader to abandon inflationary spending. There are major tensions between these two, according to the Globe and Mail. The Prime Minister is losing control of public finances, borders, his caucus, and even his cabinet. Can he do any good and at least tell us how much the deficit exceeds the announced $40 billion? The Honourable Deputy Prime Minister and Minister for Finance. Mr. Speaker, I will be tabling the fall economic statement next Monday in this very House. And in this economic statement, we show that the government maintains its budgetary anchor, more specifically, reducing the federal debt on average in the economy. I expect the debt-GDP ratio that we've forecasted to be respected for 2023-2024. The Honourable Member for Bellechasse-les-Échemins-Lévis. Mr. Speaker, the Minister of Finance waits until the eve of the end of the parliamentary session to table her economic update. We've seen more courageous people in this House because bad news awaits. And the Globe and Mail tells us that the Prime Minister wants to radically increase spending and that his Finance Minister is failing to make him see reason. The Parliamentary Budget Officer has said it. The deficit will be much higher than the $40 billion announced. How big is the deficit? The Honourable Deputy.
That was really weird. He started whispering into the microphone and drinking his coffee.
I am over the moon that the member across the way quoted the Parliamentary Budget Officer, because It's he and his analysis that concluded, and I quote, that the current budgetary policy is viable and sustainable in the long term. That's what the PBO said, straight from the PBO's mouth, which is objective. That's the truth of the matter, Mr. Speaker. The Honourable Member for Belchesse-Lévis. Well, the truth is that there's disorder in public finances, tension at the border.
Fang is back. Oh, no. One of the greatest trolls ever has returned to the chat.
So no longer gets along with him, according to the Globe and Mail. It is time for him to ask the real question. There's enough to do work. How high and how big is the deficit? The Honourable Deputy Prime Minister and Minister for Finance. Mr. Speaker, I will be tabling the economic statement next Monday here in this very chamber. And in this full economic statement, we show that the government will maintain its budgetary anchor. It will reduce its federal debt level in the economy in the medium term. The debt-GDP ratio that we forecasted for 23-24 will be maintained. The Honourable Member for Lac-Saint-Jean. 3 Chilean asylum seekers escaped from the Laval Immigration Holding Centre. These are people who are linked to international organised crime and are subject to removal orders. These 3 escapees join a long list of nearly 750 asylum seekers in Quebec who are inadmissible for security reasons, but whom the federal government is not deporting. We're talking about people who are putting the public at risk. How can the government justify such huge loopholes in the monitoring and deportation of asylum seekers with criminal pasts? The Honourable Minister for Public Safety. Mr. Speaker, of course we share the concerns of our colleague when it comes to the circumstances of what happened at the Laval Immigration Holding Centre. I've asked the CBSA to immediately examine and revisit the security measures in this holding centre. We tripled the number of guards. We changed protocol with regards to the access of certain people to certain parts of the holding centre, and we will continue to make sure that this situation will not happen again. The Honourable Member for Avignon-la-Métis, Matapédia. The 750 nationals with criminal past that the federal government is unable to deport from Quebec are just the tip of the iceberg, Mr. Speaker. In 2020, the Auditor General denounced the CBSA's failure to investigate the whereabouts of people who were supposed to be deported. I quote Ms. Hogan, at least 70% of cases involving criminals had not been reviewed annually, and 75% of cases involving failed asylum seekers had not been reviewed every 3 years as they should have been. Mr. Speaker, clearly, the agency is unable to act. Is it because of a lack of resources or a lack of political will? The Honourable Minister for Public Safety.
Yeah, I said it before, Fang is just Trudeau's burner account.
Surprise? It's not one or the other. It's a circumstance that many other countries have seen in the world with an increase of asylum seekers. However, we do accept the responsibility under our statutes. We must make sure that certain people who are a threat for Canada's public safety, make sure that they are detained before they are sent out of Canada. And that is exactly the kind of investments that we're doing now, and we'll continue to guarantee the safety of everyone.
Oh, Greg just muted the microphone. Somebody is screaming. Somebody has stood up and completely interrupted Parliament and is just screaming at the top of their lungs right now. And Greg has fully muted it. I wonder what is happening. I wonder if this has anything to do with the suspicious package they found on Parliament Hill. As a matter of fact, I'm going to look into an update on that to see if there is anything as we sit here and wait. Yes, by the way, a suspicious package was found on Parliament Hill earlier, about an hour ago, so we will see what comes from that. Question period feed is back. Okay.
The Honourable Member for Avignon-la-Métis, Metapedia.
All right, I don't know what that was about, but we've continued.
Political will is still valid. The Globe and Mail reported last winter that since 2016, so barely a month after the new Liberal government came into power, 14,609 people had been issued deportation notices. Of these, 9,317 were still in Canada in May of 2023. Imagine, during almost the entire Liberal reign, 64% of inadmissible people were never even deported. At this point, deportations of people with a criminal past are virtually voluntary, it seems. Why would defying a deportation notice, even for years, be of no consequence under the Liberals? The Honourable Minister for Public Safety. Mr. Speaker, our colleague knows full well that deporting people without a legal status in Canada and who have violated criminal law is a significant responsibility that we accept. And we have to work with our police bodies, our law and order bodies. We are also working with our partners in a number of provinces to make sure that we can detain people who are a real threat for public safety with a view of expelling them from Canada. And I trust they will be able to continue this work.
The Honourable Member for Calgary Forest Lawn.
The spending spree spat between the Finance Minister and the Prime Minister has spilled into the public, according to the Globe and Mail. The PBO confirmed the Prime Minister forced this Finance Minister to blow through her $40 billion fiscal guardrail promise, taking Canada's finances off a cliff. And now he wants her to bury the bad news of their deficits in the dark days of December next Monday. How bad is the deficit?
The Honourable Deputy Prime Minister and Minister of Finance. I'll ask the Honourable Member to please take his seat. The Honourable Deputy Prime Minister and Minister of Finance.
Mr. Speaker, I was actually about to ask, are they giving out Christmas presents for alliteration? I mean, we're supposed to be talking about serious issues here. I am, though, glad that the member opposite has spoken about the Parliamentary Budget Officer, because just a few weeks ago, in his independent analysis, the Parliamentary Budget Officer concluded, and I quote, "Current fiscal policy in Canada is sustainable over the long term." That's the conclusion of the PBO that was just cited by the member opposite, and it's good news for Canadians.
The Honourable Member for Calgary Forest Lawn.
Well, Canadians can't have Christmas because she can't do math. And the Prime Minister lost control of Canada's finances. And
He just annihilated her. Oh my God.
We'll have her getting the bill no more treatment. And Canadians have to foot the bill for the spending spree separation. We know she already blew through her $40 billion fiscal guardrail promise. But what is the deficit number?
That was wild. He absolutely cooked her.
Prime Minister and Minister of Finance.
Mr. Speaker, I do really look forward to tabling the fall economic statement.
Holy fuck, that was golden.
In this House on Monday. And in the fall economic statement on Monday, we will show that the government is maintaining its fiscal anchor, specifically reducing the federal debt as a share of the economy over the medium term. In addition, I expect the debt to GDP ratio we projected in the spring budget for fiscal year 23-24 will be met. Canada has the lowest debt to GDP ratio in the G7. We have the lowest deficit, and this is good news for Canada and Canadians.
The Honourable Member for Mégantic-L'Érable. After 9 years of this Prime Minister, Supported by the Bloc, the Liberal government is in full meltdown. The Prime Minister and his Finance Minister are at loggerheads, and both have lost control of the country's public finances. The Finance Minister has made a promise. The Liberal government's deficit will not exceed $40 billion. The Prime Minister couldn't care less about the consequences for Canadian families. A simple question. While he's still here, what is the deficit? Who won? The Honourable Deputy Prime Minister and Minister for Finance. Mr. Speaker, Canadians will win. Why? Because our government is united. Our government is working all together to deliver the goods for Canadians. With dental care, with early childcare, with medicine for Canadians. We are here for Canadians, and we are proud to be here for them, and we do it as a team.
The Honourable Member. Mr. Speaker, the Prime Minister doesn't even seem to want to listen to what the Minister of Finance has to say. There's infighting on the other side of the House. The Globe and Mail has said that 5 Liberal Party veterans and 3 political staffers have confirmed that tensions are growing between the Minister of Finance's office and the PMO. We know that the Minister of Finance really wants to keep things at her already high level of $40 billion for the deficit, but the Prime Minister wants it to go to an even more shocking level. Will the Minister of Finance keep her word and state that finally she's sticking to the $40 billion deficit? What is the deficit? The Honourable Deputy Prime Minister and Minister of Finance. Mr. Speaker, I will be tabling the fall economic statement on Monday in this very House. And in the fall economic statement next week, we will show that this government is maintaining its budget anchors. It's all about reducing the proportion of the federal debt in the economy over the medium term. And the debt to GDP ratio that we stated in the spring budget will be respected. Thank you.
The Honourable Member for Port Moody, Coquitlam.
Canadians are hurting, and we saw it expressed in the gallery today. Renters in Canada are facing exploitation and eviction because of corporate greed.
Shame on the Conservative.
Colleagues, I'm having difficulty hearing the question. It is not for the chair to agree or disagree with the content of the question, but to making sure that it does follow the rules. I'm asking members to please restrain themselves. The Honourable Member from Port Moody, Coquitlam, from the top, please.
Canadians are hurting, and we saw it expressed in the gallery today. Renters in Canada.
Canadians are hurting, so I voted for Trudeau again.
Agreed.
And we got a mute in the House of Commons. Emperor Fergus, Darth Fungus, Fred Gungus has muted the mic. To no shock at all, he continues to mute the microphone.
I'm going to invite the Honourable Member to rephrase her question. I just want to remind the member that we should not make reference to what has...
I don't think anybody wants to remember Kathleen Wynne. I think it's better if we don't remember Kathleen Wynne. Holy hell. Or maybe it's better that we do remember her, so that we can never vote somebody like that in again. Holy shit.
Expressed in the gallery today.
That's right.
It's getting chaotic in the House of Commons right now, ladies and gentlemen. You are here right now. You are witnessing the circus at its finest.
Order. And I hope the Honourable Member can understand and can hear my voice when I do say that we should not make reference to what has happened in the gallery or not happened in the gallery. And I'll invite the Honourable Member to rephrase her question for the last time before I move on.
Canadians are hurting. And we saw in Ottawa today that it was expressed around homelessness.
Yes, that's right.
Renters in Canada are facing exploitation and eviction because of corporate greed. It's so bad a class action lawsuit has started against corporate landlords, accusing them of price fixing using the AI program YieldStar. For months, New Democrats have called on the Liberals to protect renters. But the Liberals and Conservatives chose to protect corporate profits over people. Why is the Prime Minister letting down renters and caving to corporate landlord CEOs?
The Honourable Minister for Housing, Infrastructure and Communities.
Mr. Speaker, no one in this country is choosing to be homeless. No one is choosing to live in an encampment. We know that the cost of housing has gotten too high. That's why we are putting billions of dollars of investments on the table to help build out more affordable housing, to help community entities actually provide services to people who do not have a roof over their head. What's fascinating, Mr. Speaker, is the Conservatives seek to make a joke out of a very serious issue such as homelessness. We're going to be
a serious issue that you have not helped in the slightest.
And as the jeering continues, Canadians should be ashamed of the behavior of the Conservative Party, who use homeless people as props in this country.
The Honourable Member for Skeena-Bulkley Valley. Colleagues, the Honourable Member from Skeena-Bulkley Valley.
Mr. Speaker, in January, Air Canada will become the latest big airline to charge junk fees for basic services like checked baggage. And the minister's reaction to this? She's taking a page from the industry minister's playbook and going to sit down with the CEOs and ask very nicely if they would please change their ways. It didn't work for grocery prices, and it's not going to work for these airlines' junk fees. It turns out the minister has the regulatory powers she needs to stand up for Canadians that are tired of being gouged. Will she use it?
Hear, hear!
The Honourable President of the Treasury Board and Minister of Transport.
Mr. Speaker, the honourable member opposite actually has it inaccurate. If I could clarify, we are extremely concerned with airlines putting forward junk fees, and the Minister of Finance has specified this in successive budgets. I will be speaking with the airline executives. I will be calling them out for charging these extra fees. Canadians want excellent service, not excellent fees, and our government will be standing for passengers and Canadians every step of the way.
Excellent fees.
The Honourable Member for Davenport.
Mr. Speaker, Canadians received great news last week about a temporary tax break we are implementing for all Canadians. Our government is exempting essentials like groceries, snacks, children's clothing, and gifts from the GST starting December 14. This will deliver tangible and immediate support to Canadians struggling with the cost of living. Can the minister share why all members of this House should support this tax break?
Judy. The Honourable Deputy Prime Minister and Minister of Finance.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I would really like to thank my neighbour, the Honourable Member for Davenport, for that great question and for her very hard work on behalf of her constituents. It's expensive to raise a family, especially around the holidays, so our government is stepping up to support Canadians by giving them a tax break. This includes children's clothing, diapers, and car seats. And with the holidays coming up, we're also making children's toys, puzzles, books, and board games tax-free. For a party that claims to want to lower taxes, the Conservatives sure seem keen on taxing Canadians' holidays. Why won't the Conservatives support them?
The Honourable Member for...
Your trick isn't working, Freeland. Please stop.
The Minister said that the government would not crash through the deficit guardrail. The Globe reports today that all the Prime Minister's new spending is upending the deficit target and that finance officials view it as unwise and making little sense. Tonight, we vote on $24.8 billion in new spending. So will the Finance Minister tell us why we should vote for something that upends the deficit target?
$24.8 billion more in spending? How about we just stop? Just stop.
Minister of Finance.
Mr. Speaker, I do look forward to tabling the fall economic statement in this House on Monday. And in next week's fall economic statement, we will show that the government is maintaining its fiscal anchor, specifically reducing the federal debt as a share of the economy over the medium term. In addition, I expect that the debt to GDP ratio we projected in the spring budget for fiscal year 23-24 will be met. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable Member
I'm Michael
for
Jordan.
Wellington.
Stop it.
Mr.
Get some
Speaker,
help.
The Globe also reports that the Finance Minister and the Prime Minister are at odds over all this new spending. It reports that the Prime Minister's office has viewed the Finance Minister as ineffective in communicating, and also stated that a senior Liberal said that the current dynamic appears to be similar to what happened to Bill Morneau before he resigned in 2020. John Turner resigned as Finance Minister in 1975 when he was at odds with the Prime Minister. Simple question: does the Finance Minister still have confidence in the Prime Minister?
The Honourable Order. The Honourable Deputy Prime Minister and Minister of Finance.
Yes.
Huh? She thought she was funny with that one, didn't she?
Order. The Honourable Member for Peterborough Kawartha.
According to the Globe and Mail, the Finance Minister herself said the radical Liberal spending risks blowing past her promised fiscal guardrails. So she has a choice. She can break rank and join the Liberal minister graveyard like the former Finance Minister Bill Morneau, or she can abide by this weak Prime Minister and drive Canadians off of a fiscal cliff. Which one?
Order.
Crocodile Lady
Leader
Karina.
of the government in the House of Commons.
Mr. Speaker, what we are seeing from the Conservatives is an attempt to distract from the fact that when they have an opportunity to support a tax reduction for Canadians, they actually voted against it, Mr. Speaker. They talk out of one side of their mouth and do the absolute opposite all of the time, Mr. Speaker. On this side of the House, we are absolutely united in our support for Canadians. And over the holidays, we are proud to offer them a GST holiday to make sure that they can have toys and clothing and car seats and diapers at a reduced price for their children, and that's what matters to us. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
I'm going to ask the Honourable Member for Barrie Innisfil, please, to not take the floor. The Honourable Member for Peterborough Kawartha.
Mr. Speaker, you can't spend your way out of debt. The fact that the Conservatives have to say that to the Finance Minister speaks volumes to why we have record high usage of food banks in this country. She has a choice today, and everyone knows there's tension. She promised a guardrail of $40 billion, which in itself is outrageous. Bill Morneau, the former Finance Minister, was in the same position, and he wouldn't abide by that weak Prime Minister, and he quit. The question is, will she have the courage to do the same and stand up for Canadians, not that Prime
Minister? The Honourable Leader of the Government in the House of Commons.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, the only people who are engaging in bullying tactics in the House are the members of the Conservative Party of Canada. Mr. Speaker, if they truly cared about supporting Canadians through these tough times, they would have voted in favor of the GST tax break over the holidays. But this is par for the course with those members opposite. They cry crocodile tears, but whenever it comes to helping Canadians, they oppose them. Whether it's the school food program that is already going to be supporting 200,000 kids across this country, the Canada Child Benefit that puts up to over $7,000 a year in the pockets of Canadian families, they oppose it. Mr. Speaker, we are united in our support for Canadians, and we will continue to stand up against those.
The honourable member for Saint-Hyacinthe-Bagotte. Mr. Speaker, we've had the Arrive Can fiasco, but now we have the fiasco at the CBSA. This was a customs clearance application, and it broke down 22 times in the first 30 days of its use. It completely paralyzed imports and was a total failure, despite the fact that it cost 50% more than planned, with inconclusive tests and hidden documentation. The Trade Committee has unanimously, including the Liberals on the committee, asked the AG to look into this. Will the minister listen to his own colleagues and agree to the AG investigation? The Honourable Minister of Public Safety. Mr. Speaker, I don't want to correct my colleague, but when he says that the committee adopted a motion unanimously, we would have thought that would include our Liberal colleagues, which confirms the fact that we want parliamentary committees to stand up and respect the independence of the Auditor General as well. If she decides to look into this, of course the government will be happy to look into it. We expect the AG to do excellent work, as she always does. The honourable member. Well, yesterday when the minister answered, he praised our border agents for their hard work, and we also agree that they should be praised for that, but we're not so sure about their bosses and their offices. The CBSA was already under the spotlight with ArriveCan, but today the problem is the CARM application, with all of its various budget and functioning problems. Because ArriveCan at least worked, CARM doesn't even work, and if it takes Ottawa as long to fix this as it took to fix the Phoenix pay system, our businesses will have hell to pay. Will the minister do something about this?
L'honorable ministre de la Sécurité publique.
The Honourable Minister of Public Safety. Mr. Speaker, we are always looking for solutions. As my colleague very well knows, this system replaced an outdated 36-year-old system, which might have broken down at any moment on a broad scale. It is used to evaluate $40 billion in taxes and tariffs every year. This government is always looking to secure a system that is so important for the Canadian economy. We quickly deal with all problems in order to give importers quick answers, and we will continue to do so.
The honourable member for Lambton Kent Middlesex.
Speaker, the NDP-Liberal government recklessly pushed through their costly temporary GST tax trick that's going to hurt our small businesses, and they're trying to buy votes with a $250 check. But the finance minister's own department called this over $6 billion spend, quote, fiscally unwise, and described it as making no fiscal economic sense. Because of spending like this, we know that the finance minister is going to blow through her $40.1 billion fiscal guardrail. So will she confirm that her deficit won't be a penny over $46 billion?
The Honourable Minister for Small and Medium-Sized Enterprises.
Mr. Speaker, this is coming from a member whose leader calls our government supports big fat government spending. When it's time to step up, the Conservative Party never steps up to support small businesses. We have cut taxes for small businesses from 11% to 9%, saving small businesses $6.3 billion every single year. We have putting more money back into the pockets of small businesses through our Canada Carbon Rebate. That's $2.5 billion going out to 600,000 small businesses across the country. We will always be there to support them, Mr. Speaker.
The The honourable member for Lambton, Kent, Middlesex.
Well, Mr. Speaker, you know Canada is about to be sent over a fiscal cliff when the Liberals can't even do basic math. Mr. Speaker, that's why tensions are rising in the Liberal caucus. The finance minister is as unfit to lead as her boss. Maybe that's why the Prime Minister is making unilateral financial decisions. So will the finance minister continue to go blindly and continue to put Canada decimate our economy, or will she actually show some leadership and stick to her $40 billion fiscal guardrail?
Hear, hear. The Honourable Leader of the Government in the House of Commons.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, again, on this side of the House, we are putting Canadians first. That's right. That is what we have done for the last 9 years. In understanding when times are tough, we are there for Canadians. Mr. Speaker, what we hear from Conservative members of Parliament is that when times are tough, they look to take supports away from Canadians, not to be there for them. We will not allow that to happen.
And when you guys made times tough, you decided to give us a half-assed, air quotations, tax break that is only going to drive taxes up further after the 2 months are over. Holy shit, these people are insane.
According to the Globe and Mail, there is more and more tension between the Prime Minister and the Minister of Finance about ideas like this electioneering vote-buying effort to reduce or to remove the GST over the holidays. And even federal public servants or their own staffers are saying that this $6 billion cost is fiscally imprudent. We know that the Prime Minister has completely lost control over the finances. Does the minister understand that she needs to say stop to this Prime Minister's crazed requests? The Honourable Minister of Public Services and Procurement. Well, as we've heard from the Minister of Finance on several occasions, this is a matter of fiscal accountability. Because here in Canada, we have the best fiscal record of any country in the G7, including the debt to GDP ratio, the deficit to GDP ratio, as well as debt interest costs. Interest rates are going down. Inflation is going down. Employment is going up. What's really irresponsible is to do as the Conservatives are doing. They keep repeating that it's hard for Canadians to get by right now, but they're actually trying to make their lives even harder.
The Honourable Member for Fleetwood Port Kells.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Our government made a great announcement to support Canadians over this holiday season because the holidays should be a stress-free period for Canadians. However,
we're going to ask the Honourable Member to start again. Order! But this is a good time to remind all members to be very careful about objects that they put on their microphones, as it hurts the ears, which are the tools of our interpreters. The Honourable Member from Fleetwood Port Kells from the top.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This isn't standing right there, you know. Anyway, government did make that great announcement to support Canadians over the holiday season. Holidays should be a stress-free period for all Canadians, but for some, this isn't the case, as spending can be a source of difficulty for some families. So we have a plan for that, but that would be the plan that the Conservatives voted against. Could the minister share more details about our government's plan to put more money in the pockets of Canadians?
Oh, sorry, the Honourable Minister for...
Oh, Craig fell asleep.
Mr. Speaker, I'd like to thank the member for his question and also for the hard work that he does on behalf of his constituents and Canadians. We will always be there for Canadians, Mr. Speaker, for families and businesses in good times and in the hard times. Twice we've offered tax cuts to the middle class, and twice the Conservative leader has voted against them. Today, with the GST cut, we're providing even greater support for families and businesses. You'd think with all the slogans and the childish shouting, this would be a no-brainer for the Conservatives, but they voted against this tax cut. They vote against Canadians. We are here for them. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable Member from South Shore St. Margaret's.
The Globe and Mail is reporting a big fight between the Prime Minister and the Minister of Finance. They have blown through every deficit target every year, but apparently we ain't seen nothing yet. Just like what happened to the last Finance Minister, the Prime Minister does not care about this Finance Minister breaking her promise that the deficit would not be more than $40 billion. But hey, who cares when the Prime Minister fears for his political life? Simple question. Is the deficit more than $40 billion? Yes or no?
Good question.
Order. The Honourable Minister and Leader of the Government in the House of Commons.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, again, what we see from Conservative members of Parliament is their attempt to distract from the fact that when given the opportunity to vote for a tax break for Canadians, they voted against it. They're traveling across the country saying that they're going to cut taxes, but at the very first opportunity to do that, they say no. And Mr. Speaker, this is actually a pattern of behavior because over the past 9 years, when we have brought forward other tax cuts for the middle class or benefits for Canadians, what do, Mr. Speaker? They vote against them. On this side of the House, we're going to stay focused on Canadians and delivering for them in their time of need. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable Member from South Shore St. Margaret's.
Well, there you have it, a real-life Thelma and Louise. The Prime Minister driving Canadians through the Finance Minister's deficit guardrail into the abyss. The Prime Minister is throwing the Finance Minister under the bus. And now, in the Globe and Mail, senior Liberals are throwing the Prime Minister's vote buying under the bus. It truly is hard to imagine a deficit number so bad that even senior Liberals are complaining. So what's the deficit number that is so large that even leaking Liberals are appalled?
The Honourable Order.
Whoa, Greg is angry. Greg is mad.
Minister of Justice and Attorney General.
Mr. Speaker, I've been listening patiently during this entire question period.
Oh my
I've heard
God.
a lot of
Shut up,
attacks
Varani.
of the Minister of Finance. I'll tell you why we support that incredible female leader. Because what does she do? She empowers women around this country. How does she do that? She puts in place programs like a Canada Child Care program.
Get out of your bathtub.
I'm going to ask. The Speaker stood up because the Honourable Member from Peterborough-Kawartha was. I'm going to ask the Honourable Member from Peterborough-Kawartha, please, to withhold herself while we listen to the Honourable Minister. The Honourable Minister. The Honourable Minister of Justice and Attorney General, start from the top.
Mr. Speaker, I've been listening patiently for all of question period about attacks of the current finance minister. I'm going to tell you what a strong female leader looks like. A strong female finance minister empowers women to participate in our economy. How do you do that? You put in place and have the courage to put in place something like a Canada Child Care program that has resulted in 85% women's labour force participation rate in this country. That is an all-time high. That is what a feminist looks like. That is what a great woman leader looks like. That is what a great finance minister looks like. And that's somebody who will stand behind every single day in this chamber.
Order. The Honourable Member for Charleswood St. James, Assiniboia Headingley.
The Globe and Mail has reported that tensions are on the rise, that this weak Prime Minister is forcing the Minister of Finance to spend even more. The Minister promised Canadians, out of her own mouth, the deficit would not exceed $40 billion. Now it's clear she's crashed right through that guardrail. Canadians deserve to know how much the deficit is. Don't make them wait until Monday. Tell us the number now.
Yeah, way to go.
Ah, give us the number, damn it.
Once again, I'll just remind all members to.
They won't give us the number because they don't know it, or they're afraid because it's way over.
The order, please. The Honourable Leader of the Government in the House of Commons.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, that member knows very well that we are bringing forward the fall economic statement next Monday, and we are very much looking forward to the Finance Minister presenting that to this House. And we are exceptionally proud of the record of this government, of which the Finance Minister has been an incredible leader in, Mr. Speaker, whether it comes to the Canada Child Benefit, childcare for Canadians, a national school food program, supporting Canadians and businesses through the worst pandemic in our lives, Mr. Speaker. She was at the helm of that, led us through those difficult times, and we know that together we will continue to support Canadians and lead them through these tough times.
The tough times that you have created. Woohoo!
The Honourable Member for the Northwest Territories.
Mr. Speaker, last week the Minister of Foreign Affairs announced a new Arctic foreign policy
It reflects the reality of our region and it was developed in partnership with Indigenous governments as well as Arctic and territorial partners. It strengthens our work here at home and our engagement with other nations, northern nations like Denmark, Finland, Iceland, Norway, Sweden, and the United States. They are Canada's like-minded Arctic partners and are all apparently countries that Conservatives have never heard of. For Northerners and Indigenous people who call the Arctic home to all Canadians, can the Minister tell us why she launched the foreign...
The Honourable Minister for Foreign Affairs.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Allow me to thank the MP for the Northwest Territory. As the world is getting tougher, we need to get tougher. Yes. This Arctic foreign policy builds on the biggest investments in our defence in generations, more than the Conservative ever did. It puts people in the north first, allowing Indigenous peoples, particularly Inuit and Northerners, to be at the centre of international relations affecting them. Russia and China are working together against our interest in the Arctic. This is something that we take seriously, contrary to the leader of the opposition that is not serious about defending our north and trivializing Northerners.
Not concerned about defending the North. You guys have been in charge for the past 10 years and haven't made the spending on the defense for NATO. The fuck are you talking about?
Behind the table. The Honourable Member for Timmins James Bay.
Kidd Mine in Timmins has been an economic driver in the north for the last 60 years, but the end is near, and we need to prepare for what comes next. Northern Ontario is no stranger to heartbreak, mine and mill closures, but it doesn't have to be this way in Timmins. We have a huge opportunity to shift investment to the Timmins Nickel project. That's a project that ticks all the boxes: critical minerals, job creation, and supportive infrastructure. So to the Minister, will he commit to work with the City now to ensure that there are no delays in transitioning Timmins to a stronger and more sustainable future?
The Honourable Minister for Natural Resources and Energy.
I want to thank my honourable colleague for the question. Certainly, critical minerals, including very much the Crawford Mine, offer enormous opportunities across this country. That is certainly true in Northern Ontario. The Crawford Mine is something that is a very important project moving forward. We just announced an investment of the Critical Minerals Infrastructure Fund in the Crawford Mine, and I'm certainly very happy to sit down with the folks in Timmins to have that conversation.
The Honourable Member for Edmonton Strathcona.
Mr. Speaker, late Friday, we learned that the Vista thermal coal mine expansion in the Rocky Mountains is going ahead without an impact assessment. This despite the fact that the former minister promised me twice over the past 4 years that they would do that. Albertans don't want coal mining in the Rocky Mountains. This government pretends to care about our environment, even while making false promises to stop mining thermal coal and stop polluters in our beloved Rocky Mountains. When will the minister protect our Rocky Mountains instead of protecting the profits of billionaires?
The Honourable Minister of the Environment and Climate Change.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I thank my colleague for her question. As she is well aware, the Supreme Court last year directed the government to review some of the elements under the Impact Assessment Act of Canada, which is what we've done. We still have a commitment to phase out coal thermal export by 2030, Mr. Speaker, and she also knows that 10 Indigenous...
Uh-oh.
And ask the Honourable Member who just asked the question to please, who had an opportunity to ask the question, to please
she
extend
is
that
just
same opportunity.
screaming across the Parliament right now, or the House of Commons right now.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. As my colleague is well aware, the Supreme Court of Canada directed the government to make some changes to the Impact Assessment Act of Canada last year, which is what we've done. We still have a commitment to ban the export of thermal coal by 2030, Mr. Speaker. And she also knows that 10 Indigenous communities are supporting this project, which is why, in the end, the Impact Assessment Act, the Assessment Agency of Canada, decided that an evaluation was not necessary. Thank you.
Good job.
Colleagues, During
She's still screaming.
statement from members, the honourable member had had unwittingly walked in front of the camera. As it is normal on our tradition, we allow the honourable member to make a statement again. The honourable member from Vancouver, Kingsway.
Mr. Speaker, I rise to honour one of Canada's finest public servants, our ambassador to Germany and former Premier of British Columbia, the late John Horgan. Raised by a single mum, John overcame great challenges.
More
to rise
statements
to the
by
highest
members?
levels
Come
of
on.
Public office. His political career actually
Thought we were
started
done
in
here.
this place, staffing NDP MPs. In 1991, he left to assume important roles in the BC NDP government, ending as Chief of Staff to the Premier. John entered elected office as an MLA in 2005 and ultimately became leader of the party, the official opposition, and a very popular Premier. Throughout, John carved a deeply impactful path. He had an uncommon common touch. He had that rare ability to rise above partisanship and win the respect of his opponents. He was witty, kind, and positive. In my view, John was the best off-the-cuff speaker in Canadian politics. We extend our deepest condolences to John's beloved Ellie and their 2 sons. John, thank you. Your kind shall not pass this way again.
I understand there are a couple of points of order. The honourable member from Nanaimo Ladysmith is rising on her feet.
Oh boy, here we go.
Speaker, I believe if you seek it, you will find unanimous consent for the following motion. That the House A recognize that today, on the International Day for Human Rights, the Nobel Committee has awarded the Nobel Peace Prize for 2024 to Nihon Hindankyo, the Japanese grassroots organization of atomic bomb survivors from Hiroshima and Nagasaki, also known as Hibakusha. Acknowledge that Hibakusha has worked tirelessly for decades to raise awareness of the catastrophic humanitarian consequences of nuclear weapon use. C, recognize the ongoing relevance of their message in a world where the threat of nuclear weapons remains a pressing concern. D, affirm that nuclear disarmament is a crucial step towards ensuring global peace and security. And E, Mr. Speaker, encourage the government to take concrete steps to honor this award, including enhanced engagement with the TPNW, participation in international disarmament efforts, and collaboration with civil society to advance the cause of nuclear abolition. Thank you.
All those opposed to the honourable member moving the motion will please say nay. Agreed. The House has heard the terms of the motion. All those opposed to the motion will please say nay. Carried. I see that the honourable member from Regina Capella is also rising on a point of order.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. During question period, there was a disturbance in the gallery, and it was very alarming to see the NDP member for Port Moody, Coquitlam, almost immediately not just reference it, but it seemed to have been incorporated into her question. It was a prepared question. You could tell it was prepared because even after you admonished her for pointing out the disturbance in the gallery, she could not adapt and repeated it 3 times. Now, it seems like this was a coordinated event, that someone was invited into the chamber and the member knew that there would be such a disturbance. So I'd ask that you look into the matter, Mr. Speaker, and report back to the House as to how this individual gained entry into the gallery, on whose behalf was this person invited. This comes on the heels of a security scare today in the Wellington building and a protest in the Confederation building last week where members of Parliament were impeded access to their offices, threatened, and forced to face toxic behavior. This is a pattern of behavior we're seeing from the NDP. As we come to the end of this session, Mr. Speaker, it's incumbent upon all members to respect the security and safety of this place.
So it was a member in the gallery, which is located above the House of Commons, like the viewing area. Somebody invited from a member of the NDP was screaming and carrying on in the gallery. That's interesting.
Not surprising to me, with the Conservatives who allowed for 3 weeks the occupation of downtown Ottawa, including impeding MPs coming to the West Block consistently, that they would raise this. The reality is, Mr. Speaker, the member from Port Moody Coquitlam properly corrected her question. I would suggest for Conservatives who are repetitive not only with one member, but their entire question period lineup often violates these standing orders and are very repetitive, that they should actually walk the talk and they should try to offer something more to Canadians during question period.
I see that the honourable member for Port Moody Coquitlam is rising on the same point of order.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And since the member from Regina Capel has decided to be a mind reader, I just wanted to clarify that although the Conservatives are used to being told what to do, I am not. And Mr. Speaker, if you would so kindly check the notes that I gave to the pages here, you will see that I have handwritten notes about the very, very important interventions in Ottawa today from people around homelessness in this country and how desperate folks are. So I would just raise that, Mr. Speaker, that I do have a mind of my own, unlike the Conservatives.
Exactly.
Do you have a mind of your own? Is that why you still wear a mask to this day?
For their interventions, and the chair will come back to this matter if necessary. It being 3:33, the House will now proceed to the taking of deferred recorded division on the motion of Ms. Landsman relating to the business of supply. Call on the members.
All right. Looks like they are going to continue on to routine proceedings or motions or tabling motions, documents, whatever. I don't think there will be any actual vote today. So that is going to do it for the stream today. Thank you all for being here. Thank you all for watching. I will be live again tomorrow for question period. Typical stuff, same old, same old. That is Elizabeth walking through the hobbling around. That must be her. That was her doing it earlier as well. Yeah, that totally is her. All right, anyway. I will talk to you all tomorrow. See most of you here tomorrow. Thank you all for joining. Have a great rest of your day or night. See you later.